What is a boat doing in the middle of a desert? You would expect to find a seagoing vessel closer to shore. This is the question archaeologists had been asking for decades. In 1988, there was a storm near one of the most important archaeological sites in ancient Egypt. A wooden structure emerged from the sand. It was hollowed out by termites. Scientists were determined to solve its mystery. In 2000, they began excavating the site near Abydos, Abydos. An American team of experts soon discovered a boat that was 70 feet long, and it wasn't alone. In total, there were 14 boats neatly resting next to each other. It was impossible to completely dig out the boats because of their poor condition. Luckily, the wood was preserved enough to get a sample. Analyses revealed that the boats were around 5,000 years old, the oldest fleet in human history to this date. The time of their construction predates the pyramids at Giza by half a millennium. Each ship of the fleet rested in a vault that matched its dimensions. The room was roughly a third of the size of a tennis court. It had mud brick walls that featured more than 120 drawings of boats. Ancient Egyptians incised them on whitewashed walls that were excellently preserved. Scientists have known about these mysterious chambers for well over a century. 1901, 1902. A British archaeologist, Arthur Weigel, stumbled upon a strange structure west of the River Nile. His team caught a glimpse of the interior walls. Sadly, a section of the roof collapsed, so they had to call off further exploration. Researchers abandoned the site, but its location remained on the maps. The boat's position first led scientists to think that they rested on a bank of the mighty Nile. But there was a problem with this theory. Today, the river flows almost 7 miles west of Abydos. Further studies of the surrounding terrain showed the Nile didn't change its course throughout history. Also, if the boats floated near a dock, they would be in unstable positions. The 14 vessels at Abydos were perfectly parallel to each other. There was only one conclusion possible. Someone had deliberately placed them like that. They must have gone through a lot of effort. Each boat had enough room for up to 30 rowers. These vessels could really float. They weren't models, but scholars still don't know if they actually sailed any body of water in ancient Egypt. This doesn't diminish the importance of the find. Previously, archaeologists found only small-scale models. In King Tut's tomb alone, there were 35 boat models. For a long time, these figurines were the only clues as to how ancient Egyptian vessels looked like. The boat's design confirms that they were the real deal. They are the earliest surviving examples of something called built boats. Ancient people constructed primitive vessels by hollowing out large tree trunks. The alternative was reed that was tied together to form a raft. The boats at Abydos had planks tied together. This was a major breakthrough in shipbuilding. During their lifetime, the boats must have seemed impressive. Timber was a valuable commodity at the time. There was no wood in the desert. Cedar had to be imported from Lebanon. The only person who could afford such luxury was the pharaoh. Studying the area around the ancient fleet provided more answers. Scientists discovered a mud brick structure where Egyptians worshipped the pharaoh. Its approximate date of construction matches that of the wooden boats. The same bricks out of which this building was made were used to encase the fleet. At the time of their construction, the rooms they were stored in had a ceiling. That's the section that archaeologists stumbled upon in the early 20th century. Just like mummies and coffins, these marvelous ships rested inside splendid vaults. The exterior of these rooms was also impressive. The outer walls originally had a plaster of white limestone. It reflected sunlight. In the desert sun, the structure housing the boats must have shone from miles away. Ancient Egyptian builders used the same technique to cover the pyramids 500 years later. Today, their surface looks jagged, but it wasn't always like this. When they were constructed, the pyramids had a top layer of fine white limestone. Their surface was smooth and it gleamed in the sunlight. Instead of stairs, the outer layer of the pyramids was more of a sleek ramp. Archaeologists were left with one final question. Which pharaoh owned the fleet? The answer lay just a mile from the site. This is where the tomb of a pharaoh from the 5th dynasty rested, King Senwosret III. Its time and style of construction matched the ones of the chambers with boats. The very end of his rule might explain how the boats ended up in the middle of the desert. The pharaoh probably passed away in northern Egypt. Then his body was transported down the Nile to Abydos in a marvelous procession of decorated boats. The vessels were later lowered to chambers near the final resting place of their owner. This had a symbolic meaning. In the ancient Egyptians' belief system, ships played a key role. Their supreme deity was Ra. He traveled through the sky during the day in the form of the sun. At nighttime, he sailed through the netherworld in a solar boat. The pharaoh identified himself with Ra. That's why he needed boats in the afterlife. That was the only way to regenerate himself. Just as the sun rises every day above the horizon. This belief existed for thousands of years. The more famous Pharaoh Khufu also had a ship. Scientists found it in 1954 next to his pyramid at Giza. It is some 4 centuries younger than the fleet at Abydos. But Khufu's ship was almost 2 times longer. The Great Pyramid of Giza and King Tut's tomb are some of the most famous archaeological finds in Egypt. But there are many more secrets hiding beneath the endless sands of the Sahara Desert. Recently, 2020, archaeologists found a lost city there. They have labeled it as the most important discovery since King Tut's tomb, 1922. The city of Aten is some 3,000 years old. Historians hope it will give them a unique insight into the everyday life of ancient Egyptians. The famous archaeologist and Egyptologist Zahi Hawass proclaimed the site a lost golden city. Aten sits some 300 miles south of Egypt's capital, Cairo. It is close to the famous Valley of the Kings. Archaeologists first found sections of mud brick walls that spread out in all directions. They discovered complete rooms with tools of everyday life inside. The research team unearthed a bakery, a residential neighborhood, and an administrative district. They all date back to the time when the Egyptian civilization was the wealthiest in its long history. They were also the first to make objects from iron. In 1911, scientists found a set of iron beads near a village in Lower Egypt, El Girza. These are the earliest known iron artifacts. The discovery is literally out of this world. Ancient people made them by beating into shape a piece of a meteorite. The 9 beads were once part of an ornate necklace. They are now blackened and corroded, which is perfectly normal for a piece of jewelry that is over 5,000 years old. They consist of an iron-nickel alloy. Researchers were impressed by the skill of ancient jewelers who processed the beads. Their craftsmanship is more impressive when you think that they didn't know the stellar origins of the material. The Great Pyramid of Giza also has a remarkable feature. An international research group investigated the electromagnetic response of the structure to radio waves. They found that the pyramid has the ability to concentrate electromagnetic energy inside it. This occurred inside its chambers as well as under the pyramid's base. It contains an underground, unfinished chamber. It seems that the electromagnetic response is connected with the properties of limestone, the Great Pyramid's main building material. The research results might have a practical application. The way solar cells and nanosensors function could be improved by this remarkable find.
Archaeologists were looking for the long-lost tomb of Cleopatra when they found something that seemed too good to be real. Roughly 43 feet underground beneath a ruined Egyptian temple, there was a perfectly straight tunnel, carved through solid sandstone. The tunnel is over 4,200 feet long, and so precise that experts called it a geometric miracle. The tunnel sits beneath an ancient city west of Alexandria, near Egypt's Mediterranean coast. The team that found it carefully peeled back layers of stone and debris until they hit this passage, about 6.5 feet tall, cut cleanly into bedrock. There were no collapse marks or wandering curves, just precision. If you've ever tried to drill a straight hole into a wall at home and failed within seconds, imagine doing this underground for nearly a mile. Ancient builders had no GPS, no lasers, no modern surveying tools. Yet, this tunnel stays remarkably level over its entire length. That means they understood gradients, angles, and distance in a way that goes far beyond stack stones and hope. Engineers today rely on machines to maintain that kind of accuracy underground. These people relied on knowledge, repetition, and patience. Parts of the tunnel now sit underwater or collapsed, probably after several earthquakes that struck the region centuries ago. Some experts think the tunnel may have once connected the temple to water sources or ritual areas closer to the sea. Archaeologists noticed that the Egyptian tunnel is an exact replica of the Eupalinos tunnel in Greece. It's believed to be one of the most important engineering achievements of antiquity, which only makes the Egyptian tunnel more special. Underground passages in ancient Greece linked temples to sacred springs. Back in ancient times, people moved through space in specific ways, underground and above, to reenact myths and journeys of gods. A tunnel like this could represent a path to the underworld, rebirth, or divine transition. Nobody would invest this much effort in construction just for decoration. Plus, in earlier digs at the site, archaeologists pulled up all kinds of artifacts, including coins with the names and faces of Cleopatra VII and Alexander the Great. They also found figurines, statues of deities, a mummy with a gold tongue, and even an entire cemetery packed with Greco-Roman style mummies. The perfect geometric tunnel isn't an isolated flex. Not far away, underwater archaeologists off the coast of Alexandria uncovered something that sounds like it belongs in a royal travel documentary. A 2,000-year-old pleasure boat that once glided along the Nile. And this wasn't just another fishing vessel or cargo barge. It likely stretched over 115 feet long and 23 feet wide, and had a decorated cabin, plus around 20 rowers, which turned the river into a moving palace. This isn't speculation pulled out of thin air. An ancient Greek geographer named Strabo wrote about these exact boats around the 1st century BCE. He described lavish vessels used by royalty during festivals and ceremonial outings in Alexandria. For years, historians treated that as a poetic exaggeration. Then, this wreck surfaced, and suddenly, Strabo sounded less like a storyteller and more like a witness. Even ancient art backs it up. The Palestrina mosaic from Italy shows richly decorated boats floating down the Nile. They match both the texts and the physical evidence almost perfectly. Inside the wreck, archaeologists found something small but incredibly human. Graffiti scratched into the wood in Greek. Just writing left behind by someone who stood on that deck 2,000 years ago. Researchers haven't fully decoded the text yet, but its existence alone matters. It tells us this wasn't just a floating symbol of power. People lived on it. It was sort of like a modern luxurious yacht, and the Nile was like a highway. All types of vessels with passengers were moving back and forth, visiting friends, carrying their goods for trade, doing business, and, of course, going on pleasure cruises. The location of the pleasure boat makes the story even better. The boat sat near the temple of Isis on Antirodos, an island that once hosted royal and religious buildings before earthquakes and rising seas erased it from the surface. That temple collapsed around 50 CE, and researchers believe the boat may have sunk during the same disaster. Another recent find that has to do with life on the Nile is the lower part of the massive worship complex about 10 miles southwest of Cairo. It connects directly to an upper temple dedicated to Ra, the Egyptian deity of the sun. The newly excavated part is a 4,500-year-old valley temple. The upper temple sits on higher ground, and archaeologists excavated it years ago. The valley temple is closer to the Nile, and it's connected to the upper part by a causeway. A German Egyptologist actually started excavating part of the temple back in 1901, but the groundwater sat much higher then, and he had to stop. Now, the groundwater level is lower, and a modern team has managed to excavate about half of the Valley Temple since 2024. Once they got in, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a columned entrance portico. Then they found blocks carved with a calendar of religious events, almost like an ancient public schedule. The text includes feasts for Sokar, a falcon-headed deity linked to Memphis, which was a major capital during the Old Kingdom, plus the festival of Min, a fertility deity, and even the procession of Ra. The calendar blocks all showed up around the entrance portico area, which most definitely means that the outside facade of the temple displayed this long feast calendar publicly. That's why archaeologists think this might be one of the earliest examples of a true public calendar ever found. A literal event list for an entire community, built into the architecture. On top of that, the team found dozens of decorated blocks covered in inscriptions that named a pharaoh who ruled around 2420 to 2389 BCE and had the temple built. This temple shows how people moved through ancient Egypt. Because the upper temple handled the main worship, but the valley temple made the whole place accessible. It acted like the landing area for boats coming in, either directly from the Nile or more likely from one of its side channels. So instead of hiking across desert terrain, visitors could arrive by water, step onto the temple's landing stage, enter through the valley temple, then head up the causeway ramp toward the upper temple on the hill. After about a century of use, researchers found that the valley temple had been repurposed into a residential area. And the best part is, what they found from that era: 2 wooden pieces used for playing Senet, an ancient board game. Senet shows up at other Egyptian sites too, including King Tutankhamun's tomb, but nobody fully agrees on the rules today. Some discoveries in Egypt create new mysteries instead of solving the old ones. Earlier in 2025, archaeologists announced the discovery of the first pharaoh's burial found in or near the Valley of Kings since King Tut's tomb in 1922. The newly found tomb of Thutmose II flooded almost immediately after burial. Ancient officials rushed in, removed the mummy and most of the grave goods, and hid them somewhere else. The weirdest part is that an alabaster ointment jar inside the tomb links the burial directly to Hatshepsut, Thutmose II's wife and half-sister. The inscription basically says she made this monument for him, which proves she arranged his burial. But it still doesn't explain why she placed him here and later chose the Valley of the Kings for herself. Now, archaeologists are studying a huge mound of rubble near the tomb, about 75 feet tall, and suspect it was built to hide something important. If a second tomb sits underneath, it could be complete and undisturbed. So, the deeper the archaeologists dig, the more ancient Egypt stops feeling like a gone civilization and starts feeling like a paused one. Looks like it didn't just survive time, it outsmarted it. And we're only just beginning to catch up.
Okay, what if I tell you that the extraterrestrials we all imagine as little green men may actually look like very normal Earthlings and chill in Europe? This is the Iberian Peninsula, and people living there are under suspicion. Ooh. Here's the reason. Somehow, parts of the most important artifacts that the Iberian civilization called Treasure of Villena are made of metal that simply can't be found on Earth, because it's metal from a meteorite. Now let's tackle this step by step. This is the artifact itself, and it's composed of 59 different objects. Bowls, bottles, and bracelets. Is there a pattern there with all those bees? In total, the find weighs around 20 pounds, of which 18 pounds are 23.5 karat gold. Now, if you're not a metal specialist, I'll clarify it for you right away. For comparison, 23 karat gold is 95.8% pure gold, so 23.5 karat is even purer. The remaining percentage goes to other metals to help add strength and durability to the precious alloy. There was also silver, iron, and amber in that set. The artifact could have been pretty straightforward, but for these two, let's call them imposters. Look at this wrought iron bracelet and this hollow hemisphere. Can you see that? Those rusty lines on the hemisphere and the overall weird color of the bracelet do stand out, since everything else is made of purest gold. This all started back in 1963, when a researcher noticed a dark leaden metal among the shiny bowls and bottles. The metal was shiny in some areas and covered with a ferrous-looking oxide that was mostly cracked. Now, just so you understand, gold does not usually act this way. Gold is one of the least reactive of all metals, so it won't even tarnish, let alone rust. To figure out where this suspicious iron came from, researchers turned to mass spectrometry, which checks out the mass-to-charge ratio of molecules. Their findings showed that the nickel in the iron is similar to that found in meteoritic iron. Simply put, the bracelet and the hemisphere are of extraterrestrial origin. Ooh. Now, the exact age of the trove is hard to determine, yet it's crucial. We need to know the exact age to see if it coincides with the start of the Iron Age in the Iberian Peninsula. If it does, then no further questions here. But if it doesn't, Well, it's, at the very least, weird, if not suspicious. So there's this three-age system. It comprises the Stone Age, then the Bronze Age, and then the Iron Age. The Stone Age is of no importance here, so let's compare the Bronze and the Iron Ages. The Bronze Age began when it was realized that combining copper and tin produced a material that was more durable than either metal alone. This era was all about major upgrades in tools and weapons, but two standout inventions were writing systems and the wheel. Then came the Iron Age. This time was all about slowly bringing iron into everyday life. Iron was way easier to shape into cool designs than bronze. Now this was a big deal, because iron, especially transformed into steel, provided significant improvements in all aspects of life. Tools became lighter, cheaper, and stronger compared to their bronze equivalents. You get it? Good. So researchers have long debated whether the treasure dates back to the post-Archaic era or the latter part of the Bronze Age. The most recent study claims that those artifacts were created in 1400 to 1200 BCE, and something really doesn't add up. First off, the Iron Age began around 500 years after these artifacts were crafted. Plus, ancient craftsmen couldn't know back then how to work with metals that landed on Earth approximately 1 million years ago. And while the dates are really hard to explain, there is a logical explanation for the craftsmanship. The theory here is that those metal workers simply had access to the fallen meteorite, and thus they could study it well and discover its properties before using it for decorative purposes. They could have figured it out through trial and error, and once they knew exactly how to work with this extraterrestrial metal, they proceeded to adorn the artifacts with it. Plus, there were the Phoenicians, who contributed to their craftsmanship. Now, it's true that the Iberian people have been processing metal and making pottery long before the Phoenicians settled on the peninsula. But the arrival of new metalworking techniques and the introduction of the potter's wheel enabled them to produce better quality goods much faster than before. So, we figured out the extraterrestrial origins of the Iberian artifacts. But guess what? This area is still under suspicion. The reason for that is the language they spoke. You see, for most modern languages people use today, there will always be some proto-language. Say for Italian, Spanish, and French, it's Latin, hence their similarities. But wait, Iberian was largely spoken where modern Spain is, so why isn't Spanish similar to it? Well, the truth is, no language today is similar to the Iberian. Maybe only the Basque language, but it's because of some similarities found in their numerical systems. Basque is classified as a language isolate, or simply unrelated to any other known languages, and the only language isolate in Europe. The Iberian language is unclassified. While the scripts written in it have been deciphered to various extents, the language itself remains largely unknown. And look at the alphabet the Iberians had. Looks like it doesn't really belong to our planet. But hold up, this one might be a bit of a stretch. When the Phoenicians came to the peninsula, they brought along their alphabet to the Iberians. But honestly, the Iberians probably weren't keen on just copying someone else's writing system, so they tweaked it until it looked completely different. Let's just say they took some inspiration and ran with it. While linguists can guess to some extent how most characters sounded, actually translating the language is still completely impossible. The Iberian language was non-Indo-European and faded away over 2,000 years ago. And there aren't any similar languages left to help us out. Super frustrating, right? Yeah. We got over 2,000 Iberian inscriptions from tombs, coins, potteries, lead plates, and even cave wall carvings. But aside from a handful of words, we're totally in the dark about what they mean. Now, if we could understand their language, we might have learned that they were great thinkers and all, but we can only contemplate the works of art they left. Iberian culture has a lot of amazing stuff made by talented artisans. We're talking about not just metalwork and ceramics, but also detailed sculptures, textiles, jewelry, and other personal bling. But here's the catch. Making all those luxury items depended a lot on a big farming class. At the heart of Iberian society, most folks were involved in farming and taking care of livestock. Depending on where you were, the types of farming varied. For example, up in the north, they were all about growing grains, while down in Valencia, they focused on producing olive oil and other agricultural aspects. In the west, raising animals was the name of the game. Still, we don't have much information about the day-to-day lives of the many people doing this essential work. Yet, on the flip side, we know a lot about the upper class of Iberian society, who control these agricultural resources and hire the artisans. By the 7th century BCE, we start to see a group of Iberian princes who were living the good life, trading with the Phoenicians and enjoying fancy luxury items. You can spot this elite class in their burial practices. Cremation was the go-to method for funerals among the Iberians, and wealthy individuals were often found in cemeteries with all sorts of lavish goods and funerary sculptures that give us a peek into the fashion and hairstyles of the rich. Interestingly, starting in the 6th century BCE, there was a noticeable drop in the number of recognizable burials, which suggests that these elaborate funeral customs became more exclusive to a small elite. Meanwhile, the fate of the majority, farmers, artisans, soldiers, and laborers, who made up a big chunk of the population, remains a bit of a mystery. It used to be a pretty advanced civilization, but it vanished without a trace. Researchers think it could have been due to some massive earthquake, but so far, we don't know for sure. Stone Age people were grunting cavemen with spears. True or false? Absolutely false. They were gathering around and forming real culture as far as we've discovered. In Turkey, scientists uncovered a 12,000-year-old mystery that's revising history. It's a sophisticated cosmic calendar made out of giant stone temples that may actually be a warning from the stars. We're talking about Göbekli Tepe. This prehistorical site predates even Stonehenge, our classical stone ring circle, by 6,000 years. And it upends why we think Stone Age civilizations emerged and thrived. Here's how this discovery could change our collective history. Around 10,850 BCE, a massive comet, or better yet, a bunch of comet fragments, smashed into Earth. The skies darkened, the temperature dropped, big animals vanished, and it kicked off a mini ice age that lasted over 1,200 years. What's now a place called Göbekli Tepe was home to a group of humans who survived this entire chaotic event. After it happened, they started paying close attention to the sky. As a way of trying to control time a little bit more, they tracked the movements of the sun, the moon, the planets, and comets. This in turn led them to build a huge lunisolar calendar, the first one in the world. Now, if you were to tour around this classic Stone Age monument, you'd see that not all the stone pillars are blank. Some of them have carvings, like this main one with a bunch of V's on it. Turns out there are 365 V's, which scientists believe represent the days of the solar year. One of them, a V hanging on a bird's neck, is thought to mark a solar eclipse. Other pillars have dangerous animals carved on them, like foxes, lions, scorpions, vultures, twisting and crawling up the sides. Unlike typical Stone Age carvings, these weren't of edible animals like deer or sheep. One of the theories is that these drawings were symbolic. Some archaeologists believe they reflect the fears and chaos this civilization had lived through, a kind of collective attempt to make sense of a terrifying and unpredictable world. Archaeologist Danielle Stordour has highlighted the images of vultures, saying they represent the people who passed away. In some ancient cultures, vultures were believed to carry the souls of the deceased into another realm. She's seen similar symbols in ancient sites nearby. To understand why this all makes sense, we need to dig deeper into the real purpose of this site. Göbekli Tepe was discovered in 1994 by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt. who realized that the hill in southeastern Turkey wasn't just another Neolithic mound. Underneath it, his team uncovered massive stone circles supported by pillars weighing up to 20 tons. Radiocarbon dating puts the site at around 12,000 years old, making it the oldest known ceremonial structure ever built. I mean, it predates the Egyptian pyramids by over 7,000 years. This discovery shocked the archaeological world. At the end of the Ice Age, humans were supposed to be nomadic, surviving off wild plants and animals, not building sacred complexes with symbolic art and giving birth to what we now classify as civilization. We usually think civilization starts with farming, then villages, then crops. But this site suggests something more surprising. Early humans may have come together not to grow food, but to worship. Schmidt found no signs of homes, hearths, or permanent settlement, just stuff used for rituals and gatherings. This has led researchers to believe that spirituality and communal rituals came first and that farming followed. Because to build something this massive, you'd need hundreds of people working together, which in turn would have sparked the need for food, organization, and social structure. In other words, the temple came first, then the village, then the farm. Now, Göbekli Tepe isn't just stirring debate because it's old. It's because it seems too advanced for its time, and that's where the more controversial theories start to emerge. Some researchers believe the builders of Göbekli Tepe weren't simply primitive hunter-gatherers experimenting with stone tools. They may have been the inheritors of ancient knowledge, remnants of a much older civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age. This idea ties into the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a theory that a comet struck Earth around 10,850 years ago, triggering a sudden and catastrophic climate shift. According to this view, the survivors of that event passed down their knowledge through symbolism, architecture, and oral tradition. And Göbekli Tepe could be one of the earliest attempts to preserve that memory. Now, if that's true, then the carvings at this site, especially the animal symbols on the pillars, aren't just decorative. They could be astronomical codes, tracking constellations and celestial events. But one pillar might hold the biggest secret of all. It's called the Vulture Stone, and it's freaking archaeologists out. On it, you'll find a strange combination of figures: a headless man, birds, and a scorpion. To the untrained eye, it might seem random, but some researchers believe these are ancient representations of constellations, like Scorpius among them, and that the headless man symbolizes a mass extinction event. Some even argue that this is the oldest known record of a comet impact, the one that triggered the Younger Dryas. And if you're wondering who this older lost civilization might have been, they are called Atlantis, or more neutrally, Civilization X. Theorists like Graham Hancock suggest that this advanced culture, destroyed in the chaos of the comet impact, passed fragments of its knowledge to survivors around the globe. In that case, Göbekli Tepe wasn't the start of civilization, it was the restart. Now, back to the stones. Pillar 43 may look like a celestial calendar at first, but when archaeologists recreated the sky patterns encoded in its carvings, they found a precise snapshot of the sky dating back over 13,000 years. It appears to show a meteor shower, a flood, and humanity's tragic end, aka the Headless Man. A snake rising from the ground might even symbolize tidal waves or destruction coming from below. But the story doesn't end there. Pillar seems to expand on the same disaster, the one they called the Terror of the Sky. You might see animals fleeing, waves, fire raining down. It paints a vivid picture of the meteor shower. But wait! While Pillars 43 and 56 may encode memories of a past catastrophe, Pillar 18 might be a forecast. That stone zooms in on the Aquarius constellation. If this sounds familiar, maybe it's from the phase Age of Aquarius, which is the age we're living in now. Some enthusiasts believe this may be a warning for us, and may be telling us that a similar meteor shower will hit Earth and thus you and me and us. I mean, chills! But hey, that's the kind of mystery that makes Göbekli Tepe so captivating. Today, archaeologists know that Göbekli Tepe was part of a much larger sacred complex, now known as Taş Tepeler, a network of ancient sites across the region, each with its own secrets and structures, but connected by shared patterns and motifs. In 2019, excavations began at this sister site, just 40 miles from Göbekli Tepe, known as Karahan Tepe. And here's the twist. Some researchers believe Karahan Tepe might be even older. Unlike Göbekli Tepe, which appears to have been primarily ceremonial, Karahan Tepe has signs of domestic structures like walls, tools, and perhaps even homes. And that changes everything. Because whether these sites were the work of highly sophisticated hunter-gatherers or survivors carrying the fragments of a lost pre-Ice Age civilization, one thing becomes clear. Our ancestors weren't just surviving. They were planning, tracking, and predicting. They were far more capable, curious, and connected to the universe than we ever gave them credit for. Hey, I bet you didn't know that trees used to grow in the middle of Egypt's barren, sun-roasted Sinai desert. It's true. If you can't picture it, I don't blame you. But archaeologists have recently stumbled upon a tree-lined boulevard. Yep, an actual green avenue leading to a massive ancient fortress. No, this isn't some mirage or an overactive imagination, although I do have one. But it's turning our ideas of ancient Egyptian desert life upside down. Let's rewind a bit. The site in question is called Tel Abu Saifi, located in the northern part of the Sinai Peninsula. For a long time, it was known as a dusty archaeological footnote, the home of ruins from the Ptolemaic and Roman periods. You know, the era after Alexander the Great swaggered through Egypt and the Roman Empire called dibs. But recently, Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities decided to give it a fresh dig. And what they found out turned to be more than just a forgotten outpost. We're talking about a full-on military fortress with defensive trenches, paved roads, lime kilns, barracks for soldiers, and even room for their families. A whole bunch of living quarters right in the middle of a desert doesn't feel very homey until you remember our star, the unexpected Green Avenue. This road was over 300 feet long and 36 feet wide, as long as an American football field, paved with limestone slabs and lined with more than 500 clay planting pits. These weren't for show. They held actual trees, creating a shaded tree-line entrance straight to the fortress. Imagine walking through that, the sun blazing overhead, and suddenly, blessed shade. Ooh. Now, that's not just a grand entrance, that's an ancient red carpet, or maybe a green one. But this wasn't about curb appeal. The existence of hundreds of trees in a desert landscape over 2,000 years ago tells us something big. You see, the Ptolemaic Egyptians weren't simply good at building monuments, they were also masters of water management. In a place where rainfall is rarer than a selfie with a pharaoh, they somehow found a way to grow rows of trees. Now, let that sink in. To irrigate that many trees in a desert, they must have had a sophisticated irrigation or water transport system, something capable of moving and distributing water efficiently in this harsh climate. Maybe they channeled groundwater, or maybe they captured seasonal rain, or maybe ancient sprinkler systems. Okay, maybe not that fancy. But still, it's clear they were ahead of their time. Here's the thing, we already know the Egyptians mastered water control. They harnessed the Nile with ditches and canals to feed distant fields. So irrigation wasn't exactly a mystery to them. They had the skills and the knowledge. And sure, scientists still debate what the Sinai climate was like 2,000 years ago. But many believe it may have once been greener. After all, take one look at those dramatic mountains and rocky landscapes, shaped and sculpted as if by brute force of ancient rivers. And it's hard not to think that water once played a bigger role out there. Plus, archaeologists have found tons of evidence showing that Ptolemaic Egyptians cultivated fruits, vines, and trees on a large scale. In other words, Growing a forest in a desert might feel wild to us, but to them, it was just another Tuesday. And now, this green avenue is making archaeologists wonder, what if similar irrigation systems were used elsewhere, say for transporting the enormous stones used to build the pyramids? There's already a theory that ancient rivers or human-made canals helped move those stones. And the Tel Abu Saifi discovery? Well, it might just be the missing puzzle piece. This isn't just a dream. Back then, rivers were like highways, power grids, and cargo trains of the ancient world, all rolled into one. Egyptians used them for everything: irrigating crops, trading goods, powering industry, and even mobilizing for war. If you were doing something important, odds are it involved a river. But wait, it gets even better. Excavations revealed deep defensive trenches, like ancient moats, dug more than 6 feet deep around the fortress. Those weren't just muddy ditches. They were part of an elaborate defense system designed to be filled or bridged to control access. Think of it as ancient Egypt's version of a retractable security gate, minus the hydraulics. And while the trenches were keeping intruders out, life inside the fortress was bustling. Remember how we said archaeologists had found military housing units? It turns out soldiers might have lived there with their families. So this wasn't just a barracks, it was a thriving community, with meals, routines, kids playing, and probably a whole lot of ancient gossip flying around the dinner table. In addition to all the military stuff, researchers found 4 massive lime kilns used to produce quicklime, an essential ingredient for making construction mortar. These kilns are a big deal because they suggest that during the later Roman period, Tel Abu Saifi turned into an industrial hub. It was like the Home Depot of ancient Egypt, churning out materials to build and repair buildings. But here's where the plot thickens. Underneath all of this, beneath the roads, the trenches, the kilns, archaeologists found the corners of an even older structure, a mystery building. Could it be the remains of a third, much older fortress? Or an ancient cemetery or lost city? Nobody knows yet, but one thing's clear: this story isn't over. Honestly, this might be the coolest archaeological cliffhanger of the decade. So, what does this all mean? Well, for starters, it challenges everything we assumed about desert life in ancient Egypt. For the longest time, deserts were thought of as natural barriers, dry, deadly, and empty. But this find suggests that the desert might have once been green and full of life, not because the climate was dramatically different, but because the Egyptians were incredibly good at bending the environment to their will. They didn't just survive in the desert, they transformed it. It also adds fuel to the fire in the age-old debate about ancient Egyptian tech. If they could build a fortress with tree-lined roads, moats, irrigation, and industry in the middle of the Sinai, is it really such a stretch to imagine they could engineer water channels to move pyramid stones? Forget the Ancient Aliens TV show. Sure, it's entertaining, I'll give you that, but it makes us forget something crucial. Those people were brilliant. A lot of what we call modern technology is recycled ancient ingenuity. And who knows how much knowledge we've lost over time. Meanwhile, the dig continues. Scientists are now mapping the entire Tel Abu Saifi site, trying to piece together how all the structures connect. Some want to analyze soil samples to find traces of old tree roots and maybe even figure out what kinds of trees once grew there. Imagine if they were date palms. We might be looking at the world's oldest snack lane. You already know that the implications of the discoveries don't stop with history books, right? This kind of discovery has modern relevance too. Our world is going through a lot of change, with crazy weather and huge heat waves. So maybe we should be asking, what can we learn from ancient civilizations that once made the desert bloom? If nothing else, Tel Abu Saifi reminds us that the ancient Egyptians were more than just pharaohs, pyramids, and mummies. They were visionary planners, eco-architects, and straight-up problem solvers. They didn't wait for nature to hand them what they needed, they engineered it. And thanks to discoveries like this, we're getting a clearer picture of just how advanced and, frankly, how cool ancient Egyptian civilization really was. So next time someone tells you deserts are just empty wastelands, you can hit them with this fun fact. Over 2,000 years ago, in the heart of the Sinai Desert, There was a fortress with a tree-lined avenue, moats, military housing, an industrial center, and even a secret underground structure. Take that, sand dunes! Who knows what else is still buried out there, waiting to rewrite history? Most people know that pyramids were built as grand tombs for the pharaohs, designed to ensure they had a smooth journey to the afterlife. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance, was constructed for the pharaoh Khufu. But what most people don't know is that this whole pyramid building trend started right here with the step pyramid of Djoser about 4,700 years ago. This massive structure was built for Pharaoh Djoser, a ruler from Egypt's 3rd dynasty. It rises 7 layers high above the ground and stands about 200 feet tall. We think of it today as a phenomenal architectural project, but for ancient Egyptians, the step pyramid of Djoser turned out to be more like a massive experiment, a trial run, if you will, to perfect their building skills before they moved on to even more ambitious pyramids. Reaching new heights is super exciting, but the real mystery is what is going on below the ground. In this pyramid's underground labyrinth, there is a network of tunnels stretching about 3.5 miles long, and some researchers believe these tunnels might have been part of a sophisticated water system that could completely change what we think about pyramid construction. Let's talk about this massive complex located in Saqqara. Surrounding the pyramid, there's what's known as a dry moat, a continuous trench that is up to 164 feet wide and almost 2 miles long. It forms a sort of rectangular shape around the pyramid. This trench has an average depth of about 65 feet. Now, if you were to add up all the earth and rock they dug out to create this moat, it would be about 10 times the volume of the step pyramid itself. For the longest time, people just assumed this trench was nothing more than a huge quarry, a place where they dug up stone and clay to build the step pyramid. Makes sense, right? But when you take a closer look, it doesn't add up. The trench is too narrow and deep to be practical for mining, and its layout doesn't match anything we know about ancient Egyptian quarrying methods. Plus, some sections of the trench are actually covered with a rocky ceiling, which would have made it nearly impossible to use as a quarry. Another theory suggests that the dry moat had some kind of spiritual significance. Maybe it was a sacred place, where souls of nobles gathered to serve the late king in the afterlife. There are even niches in the walls that work as a hint at this spiritual function. But most researchers believe that this purpose likely developed much later, long after the complex was built for Djoser. So what was the moat really designed for? In 2020, a researcher came up with a pretty intriguing idea. It is possible that this trench was actually designed to collect and manage water, especially after heavy rainfalls. Now, that makes sense when you consider the location. The moat sits in an area that could easily have been flooded by runoff water from nearby plains. This could also explain why the trench wasn't used for new graves until much later when the climate became drier and less prone to flooding. The story becomes even more intriguing, as this trench appears to be part of a larger, more complex hydraulic system within the Djoser complex. It is like the trench has several compartments, carefully carved out of the rock and connected by tunnels. These compartments likely served as a part of a water treatment system, where water would flow from one compartment to the next, getting cleaner as it moved along. Now, here is where things start to tie into the pyramid itself. The Djoser complex has a series of underground shafts, and some researchers think that water from the moat's deep trench might have been used to power a hydraulic lift system, and this giant water-powered elevator could have been used to raise the heavy stones needed to build the pyramid. It worked like a volcano, but instead of lava, water did the heavy lifting. Imagine a big deep hole in the ground at the center of the pyramid site. Inside this hole, there was a huge wooden platform, kind of like a giant raft that could move up and down. When the workers wanted to lift a heavy stone, they would fill the hole with water. As the water rose, the wooden platform started to float up, carrying the stone with it, almost like a giant water-powered elevator. When the stone reached the right height, the workers slid it off the platform and onto the pyramid. The idea is that water from the deep trench, after being cleaned and filtered, would flow into these shafts. A massive float, possibly made of wood, would then rise as the water filled the shaft, lifting the stones up to where they were needed for construction. Once the stone was in place, they'd let the water out, lowering the platform back down to the bottom, ready to lift the next stone. This fancy hydraulic lift system could have been a game changer, making the whole building process a lot faster and more efficient without using a lot of workforce. It is like the ancient Egyptians were already embracing the whole idea of work smarter, not harder. But of course, not everyone is on board with this theory. Some experts argue that the area where the step pyramid of Djoser was built couldn't have held enough water from occasional rains to maintain such a fancy hydraulic system. The main theory suggests that, in the past, there might have been some kind of lake nearby that would have filled up after a period of rain, and this lake could have supplied water to the complex's hydraulic system. But there is no mention of such a lake in any ancient Egyptian writings, so it might be more of a what-if situation than a reality. And then there's the issue of the hard work itself. Remember when I said this method could have allowed the ancient builders to raise stones with far less effort? Well, that might not be entirely true. According to some experts, just building this hydraulic device would have required a lot more heavy work than simply moving the stone blocks using good old-fashioned manpower. And let's not forget, the step pyramid of Djoser is like a baby pyramid compared to those that came later. The stones used for Djoser's pyramid weighed, on average, about 660 pounds each, which is nothing compared to the more than 2.5-ton blocks used later for the pyramid of Chephren. If this cool water lift theory gets completely ruled out, we still need to explain how this pyramid was built in the first place. To answer that, we need to rewind a bit and talk about the original plans. See, before Djoser's tomb became a pyramid, the idea was to construct a simple mastaba. This type of tomb was pretty common in earlier periods, a flat-roofed, rectangular structure with sloping sides. But after the original mastaba was finished, they decided to expand it a bit by adding more layers on top. And then they added even more layers, until the construction reached 6 distinctive steps, each one smaller than the previous. And they probably did all this by raising those heavy stones using ramps, not a water-powered elevator. There is still so much we don't know about the step pyramid of Djoser. More research is definitely needed to fully understand how this system worked, or if it even existed at all. But the idea of using water to help build the pyramid adds a whole new layer to our understanding of ancient Egyptian engineering. It's a powerful reminder of just how clever and resourceful those builders were, using the natural landscape and the power of water to create one of the most iconic monuments in history. The unanswered mysteries surrounding ancient civilizations have been a source of inspiration for many conspiracy theorists. In fact, some of these mysteries are so interesting that many of us either already believe them or would like to. One thing is for sure though, none of those thousands of conspiracy theories have ever been, classified. Or have they? We're all aware that the CIA has done some questionable things throughout history for the sake of national security, but you wouldn't expect a book to be both a national and international threat. The CIA recently declassified parts of a book that talks about lost ancient civilizations and the catastrophic events that made them vanish thousands of years ago. This mysterious book was written in 1963 by a guy named Chan Thomas, and it was going to be published by Emerson House in 1965 until the CIA got involved. For some mysterious reason, they classified the book, and it was never released to the public until recently. But here's where it gets interesting. The book was declassified in 2013 due to the Freedom of Information Act, but it wasn't released to the public until 2016. And what was released truly raises a few questions. The original version of this document was 284 pages long. but the PDF essay that was released was heavily censored, with just 57 pages, which makes it 1/5 of the whole document. The pages were edited before they were released to the public in such a way that you wouldn't even notice that the other pages were missing. Now, no one really knows why this book was classified in the first place, but it has some interesting content from what I've gathered. The author of the book had quite the imagination and a huge love for ancient civilizations. And even though what he had to say is very thought-provoking, some of it is just bizarre. He believes that our planet is locked into a never-ending cycle of pole shifts and Earth crust displacements that are responsible for the mass extinctions of many civilizations which existed more than 6,000 years ago, even before the Sumerians. He believed that these events caused more damage to the Earth than meteors, and he bases this theory on a few artifacts that exist around the world, but weren't really noticed until recently. But I'll get into that in a bit. Those mass extinctions that the book talks about include the end of the Ice Age, when huge 2-mile-thick ice sheets disappeared from northern Europe, Northern America, and Canada, and caused 100 species to go extinct. And here's how the author illustrates his hypothesis. He believes that there was a geomagnetic pole shift which caused catastrophic changes to both the atmosphere and the Earth's crust, resulting in the extinction of many civilizations over time. Now, even though the geomagnetic pole shift is a real thing, it doesn't just happen overnight. It happens really slowly, only about every few 100,000 years, according to scientists. But it's a bit more complicated than it sounds. It is a well-known fact that the North Pole is somewhere above Alaska, and the South Pole is close to the middle of Antarctica. Now, these are the geographic poles, and they'll always be north and south. However, the Earth's magnetic poles flipped a few 100,000 years ago. So, if you had a compass, let's say 700,000 years ago, it would instead point south and show you the Antarctic. But the author of the book has a different theory. He believed that the flip of the north and south magnetic poles doesn't happen every few 100,000 years, but every 12,000 years, and that this flip occurs in just a few hours, causing a catastrophic apocalypse. He thinks this happens as a result of an explosion inside the Earth's core. This explosion causes the magnetic poles to flip, but it also causes the Earth's crust to move. According to the book, due to these catastrophic events, a lot of the Earth's continents that were submerged underwater rose above sea level in just a few hours. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The author also states that the Peruvian Andes were beneath the ocean before the last pole shift. And even though it seems far-fetched, since the Andes are approximately 22,000 feet above sea level, there was evidence to support that claim in the late 80s. Scientists found whale bones and fossils that are said to be millions of years old on top of the Andes and the Himalayan mountains. It's also suggested in the book that the deep freeze the Earth went through during the Younger Dryas event caused the Gulf Stream to be disrupted, and he points to some interesting evidence to support that theory. Frozen mammoths were found trapped in blocks of ice with food still in their mouths. Now, this is a true mystery, because freezing cold weather is in their nature, and they were among the few animals that could truly survive in the Ice Age. So, what could have caused them to freeze so quickly? Kinda makes you go, doesn't it? The document describes the Great Pyramid of Giza as a true enigma as well. The Pyramid of Giza is made out of 2.5 million stone blocks that are placed on top of each other with great precision. It's close to 750 feet wide and more than 450 feet high. To this day, we're still not able to explain how it was constructed, and it's quite difficult to understand the internal design as well. On the inside, the pyramid has no similarities to the other pyramids, and, despite popular belief, there were no mummies found in any of them. If you think that's a bit weird, wait for the next one. There are absolutely no hieroglyphs found in any of the pyramids, and that goes both ways. What do I mean? There are also no pyramids, or anything that resembles a pyramid, in any hieroglyphs either. Mr. Thomas believes that the pyramids were created hundreds of thousands of years before the Egyptians by a civilization that went extinct. Speaking of civilizations, in his book he even mentions the Greeks. He claims that in Greece, there was another ancient race of people that went extinct as well. He claims they were extremely tall with blue eyes and blonde hair, and had access to advanced technology that the Greeks couldn't have known about in their prime. Now, before we drift too far away from the stone blocks, let's talk about another mystery, the temple in Baalbek, Lebanon, and its ginormous foundation blocks. Those stones, which make up the Heliopolis, were also used for the temple in Rome. The foundations of the temples are made of 900-ton trilithon stones, and according to the author, this is proof that there must have been a lost ancient civilization with advanced technology. Now, most archaeologists claim that those stones were made by the Romans. However, there's no evidence to support that. The Romans didn't have the technological equipment to make the stones or lift them. So, you might think, what if they just made them in that place right then and there? Well, those stones were also lifted 30 feet high and were placed next to each other with mathematical precision. And let's not forget about the blocks on top of the Heliopolis in Lebanon, which weigh about 800 tons each. But wait till you hear the next one. The Romans don't even credit themselves for these stones. They claim that they built up the sides, but they don't take credit for the extraordinarily large and heavy foundation stones. The author also makes an interesting point about the distance between the Roman capital and Baalbek in Lebanon. Why would the Romans build the world's largest monolithic stones in such a remote area, and so far away from their capital, and never take credit for it? Well, folks, it's a mystery to me. Now, let's move on to the most intriguing enigma, Easter Island, which is located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, or nowhere, if you will. The author questions how people found it or even settled in such a remote island that long ago. One of the signifiers of Easter Island are the Moai statues, and the mystery surrounding who they depict and why. What's an even bigger question is how they were created, moved, and positioned in the places they were found. According to this declassified document, Easter Island was part of the now lost continent named Mu, and it was sunk in the Pacific Ocean in a disastrous cataclysm that happened during one of those pole shifts. The continent of Mu, according to the book, was as big as South America, and what we now call Easter Island is just what's left of that continent. The author also believes that this is what happened with the lost city of Atlantis as well. Plato is even quoted about this, saying that the whole city of Atlantis sunk miles beneath the waves within just a day. Even though the whole story sounds very intriguing and makes some interesting points, we know that, scientifically speaking, a cataclysmic pole shift causing entire civilizations to go extinct isn't possible. We've all heard of the Sahara. Sure you have. It's the largest hot desert on the planet. A sea of sand covering an area larger than the contiguous United States. But have you ever wondered what lies beneath the sand dunes? To answer this question, we must travel deep into the past of our blue planet. Up until some 6,000 years ago, the Sahara was grassland. Humans were around at this time, not me, spreading agriculture around the planet. In the north of Africa, the color green dominated. Plenty of rainfall meant that there were lakes, rivers, pastures, and even forests. A completely different image of the Sahara from the barren landscape of today. But then, the climate started to shift. The region became parched, and the vegetation started disappearing. The wind did the rest. It took away the fine sediment after there were no plant roots to hold the ground together. Give it a couple thousands of years, and you get a familiar image of the Sahara. Sand and rocks stretching as far as the eye can see. But when it comes to volume, only a quarter of the Sahara is actually sand. The yellow sands of the Sahara are just one part of the story. The desert has many other features, such as gravel plains, salt flats, and plateaus. Makes you think if we understand the word desert correctly. For people who study such terrains, geologists, there is only one condition for defining a desert: precipitation. If an area gets little or no rain, then it's considered a desert. The Sahara certainly fits the bill. Its average annual rainfall is just 3 inches. Compare that to the nearly 45 inches a year in New York. When we look at precipitation, This sandy desert is only the third largest in the world. Number 1 and 2 are Antarctica and the Arctic. They are larger than the Sahara by millions of square miles. It sounds odd, but there is more than one type of desert. The first two are polar deserts, while the Sahara is a subtropical desert. But the difference in air temperature are staggering. In Antarctica's interior, temperatures plummet to minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Compare that to the highest temperature on record in the Sahara of 136 degrees Fahrenheit. But this desert has a cool side. At night, the temperature is roughly the same as the average yearly temperature in Denmark. This hot and cold roller coaster makes it hard to choose the right outfit when venturing into the Sahara. And what about the sand? How deep is it actually? The depth varies between 70 and 140 feet. That's not too deep. If you put the Statue of Liberty in a tall dune, half of it would still stick out of the sand. Its vast amounts in the Sahara were created by aeolian processes. That's Greek for wind. Over time, it blows and shapes the surface of the earth. In dry areas with sparse vegetation, winds erode the ground much faster. That's what happened in North Africa. Under all that sand is the bedrock and cracked clay. If you started digging, you would find the same everywhere on the planet, with one important difference. There is some type of soil covering the bedrock. This is not the case in the Sahara. Because of the arid climate and a lack of vegetation, sand covers the ground below. Over the course of thousands of years, a lot of interesting finds ended up in the desert sand. For example, there are petrified tree trunks. These are essentially preserved prehistoric trees. They date back to the time when the region was lush green. In some places, the trees of this fossilized forest are at least 65 feet tall. The wood is so well preserved that you can still see the texture and knots. There are even fossilized pine cones. In 1992, scientists found glass fragments in eastern Sahara. These canary yellow glass shards were scattered across hundreds of miles. They didn't belong to an ancient civilization, although ancient Egyptians used them to make jewelry. In fact, the breastplate of King Tut had a beautiful scarab beetle centerpiece made from this desert glass. For a long time, scientists were puzzled about the true origins of these fragments. They finally concluded that the glass was around 29 million years old. It is an impact tape. If that sounds like it has something to do with the word impact, you are correct. These rocks are formed when a meteorite hits the surface of the Earth. This generates a lot of heat. Scientists estimate that the temperature needed to melt this mineral was close to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Apart from the regular fine-grained sand, we also have melted sand in the Sahara. But the desert conceals other unlikely artifacts. Shark teeth are a common find in Morocco, which sits in the western part of the Sahara. What are the fossilized teeth of these marine predators doing in the middle of the desert? This part of the world looked entirely different millions of years ago. There was a sea cutting right through what is now a desert. The Trans-Saharan Seaway ran the length of present-day Algeria and Mali. It was around 165 feet deep. That was enough for all sorts of aquatic animals to inhabit it. Large catfish, sea snakes, and of course sharks lived in the area. British archaeologists even unearthed a turtle shell in Mali in the 1980s. For centuries, there was even an entire city hidden under the desert. Timgad was a Roman outpost constructed by the Emperor Trajan around the year 100 in the current era. For various reasons, its residents abandoned it around the year 700. The sands of the Sahara soon engulfed the city. It had remained hidden for nearly 1,000 years. Then, in the 1700s, a Scottish explorer started digging out the city. His team first uncovered a sandstone triumphal arch 40 feet high, similar to the ones we can see in Rome and Paris today. An amphitheater soon popped out of the sand, and it was followed by well-preserved statues of Roman emperors. The Scotsman's find was so impressive that no one believed him at first. It took 2 more centuries for archaeologists to fully excavate the city during the 1950s. The site covers a surface as large as 10 polo fields. The ruins reveal the full mastery of Roman city planning. All the streets meet at a right angle in what is known as an orthogonal grid. You can find the same layout in modern cities such as New York. Historians estimate that during its heyday, 10,000 people called Timgad home. Different nationalities lived here, from Romans to people of African descent. Today, more than 2.5 million people live in and around the Sahara. They are spread across 11 countries in total, and their living space is growing. The desert is 10% larger than it was just a century ago. This process doesn't involve sand pouring out of the Sahara. The ecosystems on the edges of the desert simply change over time. The wind blows the soil away and vegetation dwindles. The perfect conditions for the formation of a desert landscape. These changes are happening in the Sahel, a region south of the Sahara Desert. That's why the African countries have recently come together for a project called the Great Green Wall. The primary goal is to stop the desertification of the Sahel and hold back the sands of the Sahara. Their plan is ambitious and involves planting a wall of trees from the west to the east of the African continent. The proposed forest is not only going to be long, but wide as well. The Sahara and the Sahel share a historic bond. Since antiquity, camel caravans have been making the journey from Africa's Mediterranean coast in the north to the savannas in the south. The golden age of this trade kicked off in the 9th century. The perilous journey took several months to complete. The route was 2.5 times longer than the length of the Grand Canyon. Explorers still find evidence of these ancient caravans hidden away under the sands of the Sahara.
There's this interesting ancient site near St. Louis, Missouri, that a lot of people don't know about. It's called Cahokia, and it used to be a huge city with up to 20,000 people living there back in the 11th century. It's full of these massive earthen mounds that were built by hand, and the biggest one is still there today, at the Cahokia Mound State Historic Site. Even though we don't know everything about this civilization, researchers have been able to piece together some information from the remains they've found. For starters, they found some pretty old teeth at this site. After studying their appearance and structure, scientists suggest that a lot of different indigenous groups lived there. About a third of them came from other areas in the middle of the continent, which they figured out by studying the different levels of various substances in the teeth. And get this, the way the mounds are arranged shows that this was actually a planned-out city, not just a bunch of villages grouped together. The rulers lived on top of the mounds, while everyone else lived in other structures. It's amazing to think that they were doing things like farming, hunting, logging, pottery, and weaving, all within this one giant city. Right in the middle of Cahokia, there was this giant mound that was about 100 feet tall, and around it, there was this huge wooden fence. Inside the fence was the city center, which had a big open space called a plaza. Archaeologists think that the plaza was designed to represent the 4 cardinal directions of the world. It was like the people who built it wanted to create a place that was in harmony with the universe. The center of the city was where they held ceremonies and events, and it was such a big deal that people from outside Cahokia would come to be a part of them too. What became of this city? Hard to tell. Some people think that the reason it fell apart is that they cut down too many trees and the land got all messed up. Other scientists believe that's not true because the soil was still in pretty good shape after the city was gone. The Europeans were not even around at that time, so they couldn't have influenced the downfall of Cahokia either. There's also one theory that suggests there were fights with other communities that caused the city to collapse. These days, there are over 65 preserved mounds, and you can even climb the steps of the tallest one. The best part is that local authorities are thinking of making it a national park, so you should totally plan to visit before it gets too crowded. Mohenjo-Daro is another lost ancient city that's still surrounded by mystery. Located in modern-day Pakistan, it was a city that flourished during the Bronze Age, and it was extremely advanced for its time. It had things like water systems and fancy architecture that other cities didn't have back then. Despite these features, it's not as well known as other ancient cities, like those in Egypt or Mesopotamia. What's even weirder is that at some point, the city was abandoned, and no one knows why. Archaeologists found the city in 1911, but it took a while for them to realize how important it was. Eventually, they uncovered a lot of really interesting things about the city, like its advanced sanitation system. Excavations uncovered over 700 wells, as well as private baths and a large communal bath. Remarkably, even private homes had toilets, and waste was efficiently disposed of through a citywide sewage system. They also had a lot of trade connections and made some really beautiful objects, like pottery, jewelry, and figurines that were sold all over the region. Despite its amazing culture and knowledge, scientists have yet to figure out why the city was abandoned. Some people think changes in the nearby river might have had something to do with it. The writings that the people of Mohenjo-Daro left behind are still a complex code, even for the most skilled specialists, making it even harder to piece together their history. Have you heard of the lost city of Kolmanskop? It used to be a small settlement in the Namib Desert. Legend has it that it got its name from a man named Coleman who got stuck in the local dunes and was never seen again. But that's not the interesting part. In 1908, a railway worker found a shiny stone and showed it to the chief railway foreman, who turned out to be a hobby mineralogist. They discovered it was a diamond, and soon, Kolmanskop became the richest town in Africa and one of the richest places in the world. It had luxurious stone houses, a school, a hospital, and even an ice factory to produce ice for fridges. The hospital had the first X-ray machine in southern Africa, which was supposedly used to check if workers were illegally swallowing diamonds. Its popularity began to decline in the late 1920s when another diamond-rich location was discovered nearby. Most of the inhabitants soon began to flee the city in search of a better life, leaving the buildings abandoned. In 1938, all machinery was taken south and the town was left to the desert. The last inhabitant left Kolmanskop between 1956 and 1960. The hot climate and low humidity have preserved the structures over time, and tourists can now visit this desert ghost town. You've surely heard about this next ancient city, Machu Picchu. It's this incredible ancient location in Peru. It stretches across a huge piece of land in the Andes Mountains and sits high above sea level. It's even considered one of the wonders of the modern world. But here's the thing. Scientists aren't exactly sure what it was used for. It could have supported up to 750 people, but there aren't a lot of human clues left behind. Some people think it was more of a spiritual or ceremonial place, while others believe it may have been like a fancy spa retreat for the nobles. The extensive terraces might mean it was used for crop testing or as a trading hub. And there's even a theory that it was used as a prison because they found a cell-like area too. It's amazing that even today, archaeologists and historians are still puzzled about how it was built. Did you know that they probably didn't even use wheels for transportation? And those massive granite rocks were somehow pushed up the steep Andean mountains, even though most of them weighed a lot. Some historians think that hundreds of people worked together to push each rock up the peak. The huge stones at Machu Picchu are also so close together that you can't see any cracks between them. It's pretty cool because it also makes the area safe during earthquakes, which is important since Peru is a shaky country. But how did the stones stay put during all those quakes? They actually move a little bit, but then they go back to their original spot, almost like they're dancing. Some people think wet wooden wedges were used to keep them in place, but that doesn't really add up, considering how big the structures are. Locals back then also seem to have built Machu Picchu without using any pack animals or iron tools. They had to sculpt and put everything together using mostly their hands. Plus, the citadel is built on a fault, so they had to move a bunch of stone and earth to make it flat. Scientists also think that the real construction is actually underground because of the deep foundations and drainage system. In fact, there's a hidden water system that was just recently discovered using 3D scanning. They didn't even use mortar to put the granite blocks together. They were so precise that you can't even fit a sheet of paper between them. One theory suggests that people that lived there used stone tools made of a harder material than the stone they were cutting. In 1991, somewhere in the lush jungles of central Vietnam, a local logger found a mysterious hole among the foliage and bushes. He looked in there and felt a strong wind blowing into his face. Then he heard a strange sound from the cave depths and realized that it was the sound of a river. The logger didn't check the cave, but decided to go back there with a flashlight and a rope. When he returned, he couldn't find the cave anywhere. He spent a few years searching for it. Finally, in the 2000s, the logger managed to locate it again. In 2009, he brought scientists to this place. They found out the cave, called Sundong, is the largest in the world. There's so much space here that you'll hear a long echo if you shout. Sundong's main passage reaches 660 feet in height in some places, which is more than half as tall as the Empire State Building. The area of the cave is so huge that an entire New York City block with 40-story skyscrapers would fit in there. There's a deep underground labyrinth under the jungles of Vietnam, hiding 3 of the largest caves in the world, and Sundong is number 1 on this list. The vast space inside is filled with various plants, unique microclimates, and different landscapes. There's a real jungle growing underground. It became possible thanks to the collapsed ceiling in some places. It lets sunlight penetrate there from above. There are huge stalactites 250 feet high on the ceilings and walls, which is more than the length of a passenger Boeing. They've been here between hundreds of thousands and millions of years. Some limestone deposits are more than 450 million years old. It means they've existed since the time long before the dinosaurs. Besides the jungle, there are also many rivers in the cave. They were formed because of rainwater coming down from holes in the ceiling. These rivers are smooth and fast, like slides in a water park. But riding them isn't the best idea, since they can carry you into one of those long labyrinths that the cave is full of. And we still don't know where they're going. You may find yourself in another unknown part of the cave. This is what happened in 2018. 3 divers accidentally discovered new areas in Sundong. The cave turned out to be much bigger than everyone thought. They dove into one of the cave's lakes and reached a depth of 256 feet. At the bottom, they found a separate tunnel. Divers lowered a fishing line with a lead weight there and found out that this place reaches a depth of 394 feet, and the tunnel is more than half a mile long. We still don't know the exact size of the tunnel. Sundong also connects to another huge cave. There are lots of things you can see in Sundong besides underground labyrinths and rivers. You can find spacious rooms with lakes, and you can walk for hours along dark mountain corridors. This place is strikingly beautiful, but dangerous at the same time. And the coolest thing is that you can take a walk here. Since 2013, Sundong Cave has been open to tourists. It's not just an easy walk to take some selfies though. The expedition to the cave lasts for several days. For the first day and a half, you'll explore the 3rd largest cave in the world. And only after that, you'll reach Sundong. The path will take you through rivers, dense jungles, mountains, and rocks. You can meet many exotic birds, monkeys, and other animals. And according to many people, The way to the cave is even more impressive than the cave itself. When you reach your destination, you'll spend the next few days exploring Sendong. Together with other tourists, professional guides, and porters, you'll be sleeping in tents in different places in the cave every day. You'll see some stunning landscapes and, get ready for this, 400-million-year-old majestic fossils. There are also dark rooms with lakes that are good for swimming. Such adventurous expeditions become more popular every year. People who visited the cave call it the most amazing place they've ever seen. Another amazing cave is located in Indonesia, on the island of Flores. It's quite small, but holds amazing things inside. In 2003, a group of scientists discovered ancient artifacts here, including fossils of primitive tools, such as sharpened stones. Scientists realized that hundreds of thousands of years ago, this place was home to our distant ancestors. Then they found a very unusual female skeleton. That woman was only 3.5 feet tall. This is the height of the waistline of an average adult person. That woman had no problems with her spine or with the development of her bones, though. This and other skeletons found in the cave belong to some unknown human ancestors. Scientists called this species Homo floresiensis, or simply, Hobbit. The woman's weight was about 35 to 79 pounds. Analysis of the skull and bones showed she was about 30 years old. Hobbits probably lived on Earth between 190,000 and 50,000 years ago. There's a chance they met the ancestors of modern humans. The next cave is in Turkey. Imagine that you live in an old house and decide to make some repairs. You throw all the old stuff out of the rooms. The last place to sort out is your basement. You've hardly ever visited it and have no idea what's hidden there. But it's pretty spacious, so you decide to turn it into a room. You tear down the wall and discover the entrance to the cave. This is a tunnel that leads underground. You walk through the cave and see a real underground city. This happened in Turkey in 1963. One of the locals discovered a secret passage to a lost city in his basement. About 20,000 people could live there. There was enough space for livestock and food supplies. It's not just a maze of tunnels. There's a chapel, a school, stables, kitchens, walls, and other signs of civilization. The city was built in the Byzantine era, in the years 780 through 1180. It's not the only one down there and is connected to many underground tunnels and towns that stretch for several miles. Let's finish our journey in the strangest and most frightening cave. We're going to the southeast of Romania, near the Black Sea. Here, on a desolate wide plain, you can find a hole. This is a tunnel leading deep underground. The air inside the cave has high levels of hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide. Under normal conditions, the air we breathe contains around 20% oxygen, but it's only 10% here. You won't be able to breathe freely without an oxygen tank. The water and air here are poisoned. Almost no animals are able to live in such conditions, at least the ones we know about. And this cave is filled with 48 species of living organisms, 33 of which are new unknown species. Creeping things that live here can scare you, especially if you're afraid of bugs. Strange white snails and white spiders are crawling along the walls. An unknown species of leeches and transparent shrimp are swimming in the water. White millipedes with huge mustaches are creeping on the ground. Here you can also meet an unknown kind of scorpion with a transparent white body that doesn't look like any other kind of scorpion. Nothing here looks like ordinary animals at all. All creatures in the cave are white or transparent. They don't have eyes, but they have long paws and antennae whiskers that help to navigate in space. Plants can't live here without sunlight and clean air. This means that oxygen isn't produced in this place. So how do these creatures manage to survive? The answer is in the water. The surface of the lake and puddles here is covered with strangely moving foam. This substance is a living organism. It consists of 1 billion bacteria called autotrophs. Ordinary plants absorb carbon dioxide and use photosynthesis to produce oxygen. This cave is filled with carbon dioxide. Autotrophs absorb it and secrete tiny food particles. Bacteria feed on these particles. Larger organisms then feed on those bacteria, and so on. In the end, there's enough food for everyone. This process is called chemosynthesis. It's like photosynthesis, but uses water instead of sunlight in its chemical reactions. In this cave, evolution has created a completely unique biological system, separate from the rest of the world.
Summers in the Middle East get so hot that they change the landscape dramatically and make entire cities resurface from the past. That's what happened in 2018 when the city built by a mysterious empire on the Tigris River was finally released from its water trap. Archaeologists rushed to the location as they didn't want to miss a rare chance to excavate the site and learn more about the history of the place. They believe they've found the Bronze Age city Zakiku, founded over 3,000 years ago and fully submerged in the 1980s when a dam was built in its place. It used to be a busy hub for the Mitanni Empire for caravans on the popular trade route. It had water, which is a rarity in the area, and it was a guarantee for success. We know very little about the once powerful empire, as scientists haven't found any written chronicles in the excavated sites. That's why the archaeologists were thrilled to find an entire palace for the local ruler. Several years later, when the area became free from the water again, they found some fortifications to protect the city from foes. The highlight of their expedition was finding a huge public storehouse for trade goods and harvests, piles of wheat and barley, and imported metal and wood. Bread was the staple food for the locals, and they also loved big pots of vegetable soups and stews for lunch. Each household kept sheep, goats, cows, and pigs, so they had a steady source of milk and meat for special occasions. All the constructions found so far were built from bricks molded from mud. The walls that were underwater for over 40 years are so well preserved as if they went down yesterday. The royal palace stands out as it's larger than the other constructions, has thicker walls, and even pavements made of baked mud bricks that were sealed to be waterproof. The local king must have been in good relations with the emperor of the larger empire, of which Akiku was dependent. Traders who lived in the city collected wooden beams and took them to storehouses. The beams arrived down the Tigris River from the forests in the mountains in the north and east of Mesopotamia. Merchants came here to sell their goods and then crossed the Tigris on their way to the borderlands. Zakiku was thriving as a center of commerce for about 6 centuries until it was hit by a massive earthquake in 1350. Archaeologists found 5 ceramic vessels holding over 100 clay tablets made close after the earthquake. It's almost a miracle that small tablets of unfired clay managed to survive underwater for decades. People who created those must have carved notes on clay while it was still wet. They wrote about anything, from newly stored harvests to notes for other kingdoms. Then they would let the message dry in the sun. Scribes even had to learn a different language so that everyone outside the city could read it. Scientists believe the tablets they found used to be part of a private archive. They hoped to decipher the notes to learn more about the history of Zakiku and the whole empire after the terrible earthquake. The damage to the buildings was so enormous that it was impossible to restore Zakiku to its former glory, and if there had been any survivors, they must have left the city. Several decades later, the Assyrians, who also lived in Mesopotamia, settled here. They built their houses on the ruins of the abandoned city and used whatever structures they could find from the previous residents as outer walls. But they stayed here only for 50 years, then decided to build a new capital on more fertile soil to make some good cash from agriculture. Archaeologists working in Zakiku had to halt excavations when the water levels went back up and covered the city. They sealed the ruins in tight-fitting plastic sheets and put stones and gravel on top. They hope it will help protect the priceless site from water erosion and prevent it from disappearing again. They realize how important water from the dam is for the region, but if it recedes again, they say they'll definitely continue the excavations. There was a bustling community in today's Thalamagos desert in China around 1,600 years ago. It lived along the Nile River, which ran through the desert for miles and got its water from the melting snow in the mountains. After 3 years of work in the area, archaeologists and scientists managed to dig up 8 tombs in the desert. Thanks to the desert heat, the clothes and artifacts inside them were almost as good as new. The people who wore those must have lived in the ancient city of Nile. Nile used to be part of a prosperous kingdom at the heart of the Silk Road trading route and had a population of over 3,000 people. Then, desert sands went rogue and swallowed the city whole. Archaeologists only found the ruins of Nija in the early 20th century. Scientists from different countries have tried to solve its mysteries. It looks like the tombs discovered at the end of the 20th century belonged to the wealthy. There were some expensive items inside: a quiver and bow, metal arrowheads, gold earrings, and a glass bead necklace, a lacquer box with a comb, makeup, and a sewing kit in one of the tombs. There was also some silk of top quality, and even the bright colors like green and yellow haven't faded on it. The fabric also had Chinese characters with quotes from historical books, which helped scientists identify the period in which it was made. Archaeologists later found a large dwelling site and the clearing of 3 ruined buildings. It will probably take many more years to understand why the city had fallen and what happened to its people. Saudi and French archaeologists teamed up near Riyadh, the Saudi Arabian capital, and stumbled upon an ancient settlement dating back 8,000 years. The scientists used all sorts of cool tech, like laser scanning, drones, and aerial photography, to unearth this Neolithic-era gem. They found the settlement in a local archaeological hotspot. Among the treasures they uncovered were a stone temple, remnants of an altar, and over 2,000 graves. All these finds tell us about ancient practices and rituals. The team also found the foundations of 4 massive buildings, corner towers, and open-air courtyards, all with underground reservoirs to store water for agricultural use. There was also a smart irrigation system with canals and cisterns, which let the city thrive in one of the driest deserts in the world. Rock drawings etched into the nearby mountain depicted the daily life of the locals. The excavations have been going on in the area for over 40 years, and scientists still keep finding new artifacts to answer more of their questions. Fishers have stumbled upon ancient bones, tools, and artifacts that are 9,000 years old on the North Sea floor. British and Dutch archaeologists and paleontologists rushed to see the finds as they were hoping it could be evidence of the submerged Doggerland. And they weren't disappointed. There were even perfect sets of footprints left by Mesolithic people who lived here. 12,000 years ago, during the last major ice age, the British Isles weren't islands at all. There was a landmass made of many hills, marshlands, and dense forests that connected them to the European continent. That landmass was Doggerland, where a prehistoric hunter-gatherer society lived and thrived. But then, the sea level started going up at the speed of 3 to 6 feet a century as glaciers were slowly but surely melting. The locals had to move to areas that today belong to England and the Netherlands. Experts decided to learn more about the history of Doggerland, using data from oil companies working in the North Sea. So far, they've created digital models of what the area of 18,000 square miles might have looked like before it vanished beneath the waves. They still need to analyze samples of ancient insects and plants and the DNA of animals to get a full picture.
You've heard of Dune, right? Giant sandworms, Zendaya and Timothy walking the desert in funky spacesuits fighting over spice. Well, welcome to Mount Baldy, our very own real-life version of Dune, minus the celebrities and giant worms. Instead of space drama, we're dealing with something even weirder. A dune that's literally eating people. Mount Baldy rises over Lake Michigan like a giant sandy mountain, looking totally normal. But under all that sand, there's a mystery that's got scientists scratching their heads. It all started on a sunny afternoon back in 2013, when a 6-year-old boy named Nathan was running up the dune. The boy was on vacation with his family and his best friend. They were excited to spend their days swimming in the lake's cold water and soaking in the warm sun. At some point, Nathan and his best friend got tired of swimming and decided to explore the dunes. Their idea of fun was to run up the slopes and then slide it all the way back down. When they were running uphill, Nathan took the lead and saw something weird. A hole. He leaned forward to check it out when the ground literally swallowed him whole. It happened too fast. Nathan was gone before his friend got there. His family freaked out, and for 3 long hours, search teams desperately tried to find him. Don't worry, the guy survived, even though his chances were slim. And since then, scientists have been trying to understand what on earth caused this accident. The weird part here is that dunes like Mount Baldy shouldn't have holes or empty spaces underneath them. Dunes are supposed to be solid piles of sand. For sinkholes to happen, there needs to be running water below ground. This water usually weakens the soil up until the point where the ground breaks beneath the surface and a huge hole opens up. That afternoon that Nathan disappeared, a geologist happened to be passing by and was completely shook by what had happened. Erin Argillan, who tried helping with the rescue, said she never heard of anything like that in her years of studying dunes. She was determined to figure it out though, so she went back to Mount Baldy and used ground-penetrating radar to scan the dune. That's when she saw the problem was way bigger than expected. Bizarrely enough, there were another 66 hidden holes just waiting to collapse. It was like Mount Baldy was a dune full of invisible traps, and no one had any clue why. Argillan started to speculate what could possibly explain this phenomenon. One clue rests on the history of Mount Baldy. You see, over the years, sand was taken from Mount Baldy for industrial purposes, like making mason jars and other glass products. Some scientists think that removing all that sand disturbed the natural structure of the dune. This disruption could have caused the dune to weaken, making it unstable and creating the weird hollow pockets we're seeing now. But this theory doesn't explain why the sinkholes are only happening now or why they disappear so quickly. These sinkholes sort of look like those old Hollywood movies quicksand. They open up, sometimes swallow something or someone, then they disappear. But real quicksand is not as evil as the ones in the movies. It's a slushy mix of sand and water that looks solid from above, but it collapses into a more liquid form if a heavy object disturbs it. Another theory says it's probably because of fallen trees, buried long ago under layers of sand. These trees could be decaying and leaving behind empty spaces. If the sand shifts just right, it could cause these gaps to collapse, forming sinkholes. The problem with this theory goes back to the disappearing sinkholes. If it were true, the holes would remain open. This next deep hole seems to come out of a totally different Hollywood era. Something like if Jurassic Park met Aquaman. Behold, the famous Sawmill Sink. This wonder of nature is a deep, mysterious blue hole in the Bahamas. Think of it as a giant underwater sinkhole that goes down about 120 feet, filled with fresh and salty water. It's a natural wonder by itself, but also because scientists started to uncover perfectly preserved fossils and ancient bones in it. We're talking extinct species like giant tortoises, crocodiles, and even an ancient rat the size of your backpack. Back in 2004, scientists hit the jackpot when they dove down into the depths of Sawmill Sink and pulled up fossils that have been there for thousands of years. You may think they did not preserve well, but no. The water there is so cold and low on oxygen that everything stayed in tip-top shape, like it had been frozen. The scientists didn't just find long-lost animals, but human remains too. These bones composed a human tibia and sacrum of a Lucayan person, the indigenous folks who lived in the Bahamas about 1,000 years ago. This discovery shocked archaeologists because it gave them a major clue into the lives of the Bahamas' original inhabitants. And speaking of holes, this group of scientists tried digging an insanely deep one just to hear Mother Earth's heartbeat. Hang in there, I'll explain. It started back in 1987, when the Germans decided to dig the KTB borehole in Bavaria. A borehole is a deep hole in the ground used to find oil. These guys managed to dig almost 30,000 feet below the ground. Their mission was to understand more about our planet's inner workings, like tectonic movements, temperature changes, and seismic activity. But as they dug deeper, they were hit with a few surprises. Instead of finding solid, stable rock, they encountered fluids and gas seeping into the hole, which threw off everything they thought they knew. The heat also spiked way faster than expected, making scientists rethink their theories on how temperature behaves deep down. They actually had to stop digging because they reached the insane temperature of 572 Fahrenheit. This whole experiment sparked the interest of a Dutch artist who decided to tag along and do an experiment of her own. She used a geophone, which is an instrument that converts ground movements to voltage, and she recorded sound waves from the hole. When she got the results, she was shocked to hear that the sounds they recorded resembled a distant thunder and almost sounded like a real heartbeat. Okay, so this diamond mine could easily be scouted as a location for some Star Wars sequel, and I'm not even joking. Located way up in the remote wilderness of northern Canada, surrounded by ice, snow, and a lake, sits the Diavik Diamond Mine. Since opening in 2003, Diavik has produced over 100 million carats of high-quality diamonds. But what really makes Diavik special is how it's powered, in part by a wind farm. Yup, they managed to do that even in the cold tundra. When Diavik first opened, it was all about open-pit mining. But now they've moved underground, digging deeper to find those hidden treasures. And to make it all work, they had to build a dike system to stop the lake from flooding the mine. Pretty intense, right? And then there's the Monticello Dam, which sounds pretty Italian, but it's actually located in Napa Valley, California. This beauty was built between 1953 and 1957, and it created Lake Berryessa, which holds the record for the 7th largest man-made lake in California. The lake covers approximately 20,000 acres, which is about as big as Disney World in Florida. And although this lake works as a water reservoir for the northern region of the San Francisco Bay Area, that's not its most important feature. Its most unique feature is known as the Glory Hole. The Glory Hole is a morning glory type spillway which helps to drain the excess water from the dam. It has a diameter of 72 feet at the top, and it can drain an astonishing 48,000 cubic feet of water per second, when the lake reaches its maximum capacity. If you thought about swimming around in the lake, forget it. It's pretty fascinating, but it was forbidden since someone swam too close to it in '97 and was swept inside the spillway. Yikes.
So how alone are we in our galaxy? Crickets. Yep, we're mostly alone out here. But are there other civilizations lurking somewhere out there in the depths of the Milky Way? Could they possibly have evil intentions and be a threat to us? Hey, like we need more threats. Well, hey, let's have some fun with this. Some theorists reviewed humans' history and past actions toward one another. No miscongeniality awards there. And assuming they were somehow like us, used this to calculate the probability of space invaders. They determined that there could be 4 evil civilizations in our galaxy. The 4 could be eager for intergalactic domination, or maybe just for a good game of dominoes. They could be highly advanced in technology, or they've only just invented an evil version of game consoles. To understand how advanced these cultures could be and what to expect, there is a way to define their threat levels. A method called the Kardashev scale analyzes intergalactic nations' possible abilities. With 3 different levels, it reviews the amount of energy a civilization could take from their star, indicating their tech level. This only includes those that have reached interstellar communication. So any other beings out there using, let's say, space pigeons will of course be excluded. Type 1 shows that they can harness the energy from the sun, but only from what is received within their own planet, like solar power panels. Type 2 is where they can use the energy directly from the sun, like through a Dyson sphere. It's used to harness all of the sun's energy, having been built entirely around it. And lastly, Type 3, where civilization can use all elements provided by the galaxy, with the power to not only harness the energy from stars, but also black holes, even the central supermassive one. These levels are important to assess how advanced civilizations could be out there. The Milky Way is estimated to be around 13.6 billion years old. Modern humans have only been around for the last 200,000 years, and we're only a type 1. It's scary to imagine the time other beings have had to develop. We're considered a bit of a late bloomer in comparison. Earth is, shall we say, late to the party because we're located on the outer arms of the galaxy. Mathematicians posit that more centralized star systems have had more time to progress. Now, with that in mind, how common would other intelligent beings be in the galaxy? With all the life-ending events Earth has survived, it's a miracle to have a planet like ours, and that we would be unique. Or are we? Well, there are 100 trillion stars in our galaxy, and there are up to 200 billion planets, with an estimated 300,000 exoplanets capable of sustaining the kind of life we know about. From those habitable planets, how could we tell which ones have other beings eager to send us an email? No one's had the time to individually count, of course. The Drake equation can give us some rough numbers if we take averages of a few key factors. It breaks down the criteria of how many planets with life are intelligent enough to make communication. The numbers are huge, considering how many stars might have planets. And from there, we distill it down further to those within the habitable zone in the solar system. This zone is called the Goldilocks zone, as it's not too far from the sun and not too close to it. It's just right. We reduce the numbers even further by calculating which of those habitable planets will then be able to support life. And from those random places, the equation takes the probability of how many intelligent beings will be and if they are intelligent enough to communicate. The criteria is complicated, and so it's not an easy equation to explain. But from its estimate, there could be up to 100 million planets with intelligent civilizations. But just like with Earth's history or struggles, these civilizations may also have their own challenges. World-ending events should be thrown into the equation, like asteroids, solar flares, supervolcanoes, and supernova. They could also destroy themselves through technology, like AI dominance or nanotech, or by affecting their own ecosystems and running out of resources, or by just acting stupidly. If we take these into the equation, the remaining living civilizations could be around 15,000. But what could they possibly want from humans? We do have an abundance of rare earth materials that could be of value, ready to be harvested and easily collected. Besides an appealing vast amount of water they could suck dry, hydrogen is a required element of rocket fuels. Though these things aren't exactly rare in the galaxy and could be harvested easier from other closer solar systems or asteroids. Our technology might be intriguing to them. Our range of innovations on Earth, invented while being isolated in separate countries, help provide different technology paths around the world. Other civilizations could have followed a completely different route, and didn't learn the importance of many things we have here on Earth, like karaoke. The same goes for applied sciences, where they may have evolved in different atmospheres with different elements. Their science would be mainly affected by that, and ours would provide them with more knowledge. Then, there's one of the rarest things in the galaxy, that Earth can support life. This would be very useful for an intergalactic traveler, rather than going through the long process of terraforming an unlivable planet. Why not just take it? With a cozy outpost, it would be a lovely little holiday destination when they need some time off from conquering other civilizations. Fortunately, they wouldn't be interested in eating us, or probably wouldn't have an appetite for anything on Earth. They would need to have similar biochemistry and require the same enzymes to process the molecules we're built from. Whew. But the most likely thing they would want is to remove any competition. The biggest threat to them is anything that would provide a challenge to their domination. But before you get too frightened by these evil civilizations, this was based on human behavior. It's possible that any beings out there could lack or avoid many of our human emotions. For instance, their capacity for anger might be limited, or they could have evolved without it. They could come from a world with a history so different from ours that they could be overly trusting, making us the bad guys. But again, They may also lack empathy and other positive traits we have. Well, let's hope they only have our nice traits. Luckily, there's a big thing that separates us from everything else. The galaxy is huge, and it takes a very long time to go anywhere, even to our closest solar systems. The fastest thing we've sent into space is the Galileo probe, which travels up to 100,000 miles per hour. Even so, it would take 72,000 years to reach the closest star system, Alpha Centauri. Still, with a newly proposed laser-guided probe that could travel at 1/5 the speed of light, it would yet take up to 20 years to make that journey. On a larger scale, the Milky Way is over 105,700 light-years across. If a civilization was even capable of light speed, it would take them hundreds of thousands of years to travel from one end to the other. With a huge distance between the small number of civilizations, the only successful contact would be through advanced interstellar travel. But to achieve such a long journey, the greater the mass to be accelerated, the more energy is required, so it's not likely anything too large will be sent. But they could travel here very quickly in a small shuttle, using the ability to break cosmic speed laws. They may already be here, watching us closely, or just binge-watching Netflix. They would need very advanced technology, and the number of species obtaining this is theorized to be only 2 out of the 15,000. That means there's a 1/100% chance of evil civilizations capable of visiting us soon. If they do know we're here, and they want something from us, it's likely to take them thousands, if not millions of years to arrive. So, we've got plenty of time to relax. Time for more bright side.
What is a boat doing in the middle of a desert? You would expect to find a seagoing vessel closer to shore. This is the question archaeologists had been asking for decades. In 1988, there was a storm near one of the most important archaeological sites in ancient Egypt. A wooden structure emerged from the sand. It was hollowed out by termites. Scientists were determined to solve its mystery. In 2000, they began excavating the site near Abydos, Abydos. An American team of experts soon discovered a boat that was 70 feet long, and it wasn't alone. In total, there were 14 boats neatly resting next to each other. It was impossible to completely dig out the boats because of their poor condition. Luckily, the wood was preserved enough to get a sample. Analyses revealed that the boats were around 5,000 years old, the oldest fleet in human history to this date. The time of their construction predates the pyramids at Giza by half a millennium. Each ship of the fleet rested in a vault that matched its dimensions. The room was roughly a third of the size of a tennis court. It had mud brick walls that featured more than 120 drawings of boats. Ancient Egyptians incised them on whitewashed walls that were excellently preserved. Scientists have known about these mysterious chambers for well over a century. 1901, 1902. A British archaeologist, Arthur Weigel, stumbled upon a strange structure west of the River Nile. His team caught a glimpse of the interior walls. Sadly, a section of the roof collapsed, so they had to call off further exploration. Researchers abandoned the site, but its location remained on the maps. The boat's position first led scientists to think that they rested on a bank of the mighty Nile. But there was a problem with this theory. Today, the river flows almost 7 miles west of Abydos. Further studies of the surrounding terrain showed the Nile didn't change its course throughout history. Also, if the boats floated near a dock, they would be in unstable positions. The 14 vessels at Abydos were perfectly parallel to each other. There was only one conclusion possible. Someone had deliberately placed them like that. They must have gone through a lot of effort. Each boat had enough room for up to 30 rowers. These vessels could really float. They weren't models, but scholars still don't know if they actually sailed any body of water in ancient Egypt. This doesn't diminish the importance of the find. Previously, archaeologists found only small-scale models. In King Tut's tomb alone, there were 35 boat models. For a long time, these figurines were the only clues as to how ancient Egyptian vessels looked like. The boat's design confirms that they were the real deal. They are the earliest surviving examples of something called built boats. Ancient people constructed primitive vessels by hollowing out large tree trunks. The alternative was reed that was tied together to form a raft. The boats at Abydos had planks tied together. This was a major breakthrough in shipbuilding. During their lifetime, the boats must have seemed impressive. Timber was a valuable commodity at the time. There was no wood in the desert. Cedar had to be imported from Lebanon. The only person who could afford such luxury was the pharaoh. Studying the area around the ancient fleet provided more answers. Scientists discovered a mud brick structure where Egyptians worshipped the pharaoh. Its approximate date of construction matches that of the wooden boats. The same bricks out of which this building was made were used to encase the fleet. At the time of their construction, the rooms they were stored in had a ceiling. That's the section that archaeologists stumbled upon in the early 20th century. Just like mummies and coffins, these marvelous ships rested inside splendid vaults. The exterior of these rooms was also impressive. The outer walls originally had a plaster of white limestone. It reflected sunlight. In the desert sun, the structure housing the boats must have shone from miles away. Ancient Egyptian builders used the same technique to cover the pyramids 500 years later. Today, their surface looks jagged, but it wasn't always like this. When they were constructed, the pyramids had a top layer of fine white limestone. Their surface was smooth and it gleamed in the sunlight. Instead of stairs, the outer layer of the pyramids was more of a sleek ramp. Archaeologists were left with one final question. Which pharaoh owned the fleet? The answer lay just a mile from the site. This is where the tomb of a pharaoh from the 5th dynasty rested, King Senwosret III. Its time and style of construction matched the ones of the chambers with boats. The very end of his rule might explain how the boats ended up in the middle of the desert. The pharaoh probably passed away in northern Egypt. Then his body was transported down the Nile to Abydos in a marvelous procession of decorated boats. The vessels were later lowered to chambers near the final resting place of their owner. This had a symbolic meaning. In the ancient Egyptians' belief system, ships played a key role. Their supreme deity was Ra. He traveled through the sky during the day in the form of the sun. At nighttime, he sailed through the netherworld in a solar boat. The pharaoh identified himself with Ra. That's why he needed boats in the afterlife. That was the only way to regenerate himself. Just as the sun rises every day above the horizon. This belief existed for thousands of years. The more famous Pharaoh Khufu also had a ship. Scientists found it in 1954 next to his pyramid at Giza. It is some 4 centuries younger than the fleet at Abydos, but Khufu's ship was almost 2 times longer. The Great Pyramid of Giza and King Tut's tomb are some of the most famous archaeological finds in Egypt. But there are many more secrets hiding beneath the endless sands of the Sahara Desert. Recently, 2020, archaeologists found a lost city there. They have labeled it as the most important discovery since King Tut's tomb, 1922. The city of Aten is some 3,000 years old. Historians hope it will give them a unique insight into the everyday life of ancient Egyptians. The famous archaeologist and Egyptologist Zahi Hawass proclaimed the site a lost golden city. Aten sits some 300 miles south of Egypt's capital, Cairo. It is close to the famous Valley of the Kings. Archaeologists first found sections of mud brick walls that spread out in all directions. They discovered complete rooms with tools of everyday life inside. The research team unearthed a bakery, a residential neighborhood, and an administrative district. They all date back to the time when the Egyptian civilization was the wealthiest in its long history. They were also the first to make objects from iron. In 1911, scientists found a set of iron beads near a village in Lower Egypt, El Gurza. These are the earliest known iron artifacts. The discovery is literally out of this world. Ancient people made them by beating into shape a piece of a meteorite. The 9 beads were once part of an ornate necklace. They are now blackened and corroded, which is perfectly normal for a piece of jewelry that is over 5,000 years old. They consist of an iron-nickel alloy. Researchers were impressed by the skill of ancient jewelers who processed the beads. Their craftsmanship is more impressive when you think that they didn't know the stellar origins of the material. The Great Pyramid of Giza also has a remarkable feature. An international research group investigated the electromagnetic response of the structure to radio waves. They found that the pyramid has the ability to concentrate electromagnetic energy inside it. This occurred inside its chambers as well as under the pyramid's base. It contains an underground, unfinished chamber. It seems that the electromagnetic response is connected with the properties of limestone, the Great Pyramid's main building material. the research results might have a practical application. The way solar cells and nanosensors function could be improved by this remarkable find.
It started as a routine cleaning to scoop some mud off the coast of Indonesia, but turned into a discovery of remnants of a lost, submerged, Ice Age landmass. Archaeologists found more than 6,000 fossil fragments, and among them, 140,000-year-old Homo erectus remains. This find made scientists rethink how early humans lived, moved, and interacted in Southeast Asia. For years, they thought that Homo erectus on Java Island lived in isolation, separated from the rest of the world. But these dredged fossils blew that story apart. It turns out Java wasn't an island at all back then, but part of a landmass called Sundaland. So, Southeast Asia stretched out like someone had drained the ocean, connecting Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo, Thailand, and Vietnam into one gigantic landscape. Today's islands of Java, Sumatra, Borneo, and Bali were connected by river systems that probably looked like the Amazon, by forests where giant animals roamed, and by coastal plains that would later sink beneath the ocean when temperatures went up. And Homo erectus were not stuck. They were thriving in what honestly sounds like prehistoric bliss. Yep, it was nothing like we normally imagine Ice Age, a sort of frozen wasteland. Sea levels dropped more than 400 feet because so much water froze into glaciers. When all that water got locked up in ice, whole sections of the ocean floor popped out of the water like stepping stones. Suddenly, early humans didn't need boats. They could literally walk from what's now mainland Southeast Asia all the way to places that are islands today. They could do it while exploring and chasing herds across open land. It was sort of like a giant prehistoric highway system. That giant highway matters because it completely rewrites how early humans moved around. Instead of being trapped, Homo erectus had a whole continent to roam. They followed rivers, crossed valleys, and adapted to different environments the same way you learn shortcuts to the office or find new routes to your favorite coffee shop. And because everything was connected, animals wandered freely too. Tigers, elephants, supersized cows, and turtles the size of small cars. People followed these big animals. This among the fossils pulled from the Madura Strait, such as cut-marked turtle shells and cracked open bovid bones. When you see precise cut marks on bone, it means someone was deliberately carving meat off the bone with tools they made themselves. And cracked bones mean they were taking out marrow, which was like prehistoric energy gel, rich, fatty, and perfect when you need calories to survive. That's a level of planning and skill scientists didn't expect from Homo erectus. It pushes Homo erectus closer to species like early Homo sapiens and Denisovans when it comes to behavior. It means they weren't just surviving on scraps, they were actively pursuing animals, processing, and maybe even sharing food the same way later humans did. So if you imagine them as slow, hunched cavemen, forget that. These people were sharp. The techniques they used to process food look eerily similar to those used by other hominins. Not just Homo erectus. We're talking Homo floresiensis, Denisovans, and early Homo sapiens. That opens the door to the possibility that these groups didn't just exist side by side. They might have interacted. Maybe they traded ideas and copied techniques. Or maybe they even interbred or shared territories. All this makes Southeast Asia look not like a series of isolated islands, but like a buzzing human ecosystem, a place where different human species crossed paths. And here's the heartbreaking part. Everything we know about this place, everything humans built, lost, and discovered there, is all underwater now. When the Ice Age ended, glaciers melted like forgotten ice cream cones on a hot sidewalk. Sea levels rose. Slowly, then quickly, rivers flooded, coastlines vanished, entire human landscapes disappeared beneath the waves. Sundaland drowned over thousands of years, and the people who lived there either adapted or moved to higher ground. Archaeologists now try to interpret what these people did, how they lived, and how many human species walked that land. Every time they pull together bone or artifact from the seabed, we get one step closer to rewriting everything we thought we knew about early human migration. And the new discovery could mean that Southeast Asia may have been just as important to human evolution as Africa, the Middle East, or Europe. Looks like Sundaland wasn't a side quest, but a real mixing zone, a place where humanity experimented, adapted, learned, and evolved. Unexpected finds like this one in Indonesia keep popping up around the world and surprising scientists. Farmers in China were hoping to scoop up bat droppings for natural fertilizers inside a narrow limestone cave. But instead, they spotted pieces of fossilized bone that looked suspiciously like parts of a human skull. This skull turned out to be ridiculously old, around 300,000 years old. Scientists eventually named the fossil Maba 1. The discovery happened way back in 1958, but ever since then, nobody could agree on which ancient human species this skull belonged to. During the late Middle Pleistocene, the world was basically a crowded highway of different ancient human species wandering around. Or just maybe, Maba 1 came from a species we've never met before. The big issue was that researchers only found part of the skull, no jaw, no other bones. So it was like trying to solve a giant puzzle with half the pieces missing. For ages, scientists guessed it might be Neanderthal. But now they've used micro-CT scanning, which is like an X-ray superpower that lets you peek inside fossils without breaking them. That's when they noticed weird tube-like structures connecting parts of the brain case, something Neanderthals basically never had. The inside shape of the skull looked way more like Homo erectus, a much older human species. But even that wasn't a perfect match. The skull's size and shape were closer to modern humans and Neanderthals, and it showed traits Homo erectus usually didn't have. For example, it had a shorter forehead area and a thickened bregma, the meeting point between two skull bones. Maba 1 also had a strange dent on the forehead, almost like a bruise frozen in time. Whatever caused it, maybe a fall, maybe anemia, it happened while the person was alive. But there was no sign of infection, so that individual probably healed and kept living after whatever hit them. So Maba 1 doesn't match any known species perfectly, but it shares features with several and has a similar mystery fossil vibe as others found across Africa. In 1976, a famous paleontologist and her team found another human-like skull in Tanzania. That skull had features that looked surprisingly similar to Homo sapiens, even though it was unbelievably old. Scientists think it may be one of the earliest examples of our species ever discovered. That means this skull could help solve one of science's biggest questions. When exactly did Homo sapiens first show up? The sediment layer where that skull was found goes all the way back to the Middle Pleistocene. That's way earlier than what old textbooks used to claim about when modern humans appeared. And then there's a skull that turned up in Zambia's Broken Hill ore mine. Miners literally stumbled on it, plus a few other bones, completely by accident. Scientists started calling it Rhodesian Man, and at first, everyone thought it might be the big missing link between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. But with newer research tools and better dating methods, they discovered it's around 299,000 years old and probably belonged to someone from the species Homo heidelbergensis. Every new fossil acts like a missing puzzle piece on the giant chaotic story of human evolution. Each one helps scientists connect species that once seemed unrelated, redraw family trees, and rewrite chapters of our past we didn't even know were wrong. All the way back in 1972, a super-secret satellite was zipping around the globe. It was taking high-altitude photos of the flat grasslands in Kazakhstan. They were probably looking for military secrets. Instead, they caught a couple of frames of massive geometric shapes stamped into the dirt. They had accidentally photographed a 36-century-old ghost town. Because those photos were secret, it took decades for researchers to finally access the coordinates and send modern drones to map the area. That's how they uncovered a 346-acre ancient settlement. But what raised eyebrows isn't how big it was. The cool part is the high-tech prehistoric factory run by nomads. The site is called Semiyarka, which means the city of 7 ravines. Scientists named it like that because it's located on a cliff overlooking a wide river valley. It dates back to roughly 1600 BCE. At that time, the Eurasian steppe was basically a 5,000-mile flat belt of grass. The people living there were the ultimate minimalist campers. In this part of the world, large-scale farming is hard. Not impossible, just incredibly hard. It's much easier to befriend cattle and move when they're running out of food. Basically, nomads relied completely on herds of sheep and horses to survive. But if you keep a massive herd in one spot, they will chew the grass down to the dirt eventually. That gave humans a simple choice: strap everything you own on an animal and follow fresh grass. Their food came straight from the animals as well. They lived on meat and fermented mare's milk, a sour, slightly alcoholic drink created by allowing horse milk to ferment in leather bags. But for some reason, builders in Semiyarka decided to stay. They settled on that cliff to build a heavy manufacturing plant right in the middle of the Bronze Age. It's when humans finally stopped hitting things with rocks and started melting metal. Bronze is not a single metal, it's a mix. The most useful kind was often copper mixed with tin, because that mix makes tools harder and helps them keep an edge. The timeline of technological progress around the world is almost random. While the residents of Semiyarka were firing up their metal ovens, the Egyptian pyramids had already been standing for 1,000 years. So what did the Semiyarka factory actually look like? We are way too early in the timeline for conveyor belts and brick chimneys. A Bronze Age metal shop was basically an outdoor dirt lot. It was noisy and covered in soot. It's fair to assume it smelled terrible. Charcoal smoke, burnt wood, melted metal. Probably not that different from a modern factory without AC. If we could take a walking tour, we would see scorched ground and broken clay everywhere. Workers kept all that loud work confined to the southeastern edge of town. They were highly organized. Archaeologists are certain this was a dedicated factory because they found two very specific things: crucibles and slag. A crucible is a heavy-duty clay cup specifically designed to survive sitting inside a 2,000-degree fire. Slag is the ugly, glassy garbage left behind after you pull the useful metal out of a rock. You cannot make slag by accident. It only forms when you intentionally melt metals. But what were they making here? Creating bronze was the ultimate survival upgrade for that time period. If you try to chop down a tree with a pure copper axe, the blade will bend like a cheap spoon. You'll have to stop, put the axe on a rock, and hammer it flat again. By adding a little bit of tin causes a chemical reaction that locks the metal atoms in place. The final product is incredibly hard. Many of the passing nomads drove massive wooden wagons, roughly the size of a modern mobile home. They had solid wood wheels and required teams of oxen to pull them. Maintaining those giant wagons required sturdy tools, making Semiyarka the ultimate highway pit stop. They were mixing around 12% tin into their copper. Tin is a soft, silvery metal that melts at surprisingly low temperatures and acts as a heavy-duty chemical hardener when stirred into a vat of boiling copper. In the ancient world, tin was incredibly hard to find. Copper is fairly common, but entire empires would panic if their tin supply chain broke down because you cannot make bronze without it. Semiyarka was sitting on a local gold mine. They had access to tin in the nearby mountains, which could mean they controlled the exact ingredient everyone on a 5,000-mile steppe desperately needed. But what happened, and how did it end up a ghost town? We know for a fact they were not defeated by some other nomadic tribe or an army. Something like that would leave a various obvious dirt crime scene, from skeletons to a massive layer of black ash where stuff was burned down. There would be dropped weapons, those made on site. Semiyarka has none of that. Instead, archaeologists found a clean exit. The locals packed up their valuable tools, gathered their herds, and did what nomad tribes do. They moved on. At least we assume so for now. It's possible that they accidentally destroyed their own neighborhood. To keep an oven hot enough so it can melt metal, you need a lot of wood, which means they probably chopped down every single tree for miles. Without tree roots to hold the dirt together, the soil turns to dust. The grazing grass disappears. When it happens, traveling customers stop showing up. The town essentially turned its own front yard into a barren wasteland just to keep the factory fires burning. This whole domino reaction would leave clues, but the news is pretty fresh, so we might learn more soon. Semillarka probably simply faded away. It's certainly not the only advanced settlement that ended up lost in time. On the vast, empty steppe of the Ural, there's a city planned like a fortress from day one. That's Archaeological. It was another unexpectedly advanced place for this time. From above, the enclosing wall forms an almost perfect circle, about 520 feet across. Concentric walls ring the site, with a defensive ditch outside. Inside, roughly 60 houses curve along the walls like puzzle pieces. The layout shows careful planning and a well-organized community. Then there is Akrotiri. This Bronze Age town on the island of Santorini was buried by a massive volcanic eruption. The falling ash acted like concrete and actually locked the entire city in a perfectly preserved time capsule. Excavators found multi-story houses stacked on top of each other. You can still see vibrant paintings of ships and dolphins glowing on the walls. Inside the homes, water once ran through indoor terracotta pipes long before modern plumbing existed. There is also Derinkuyu in central Turkey. We only know it existed because of a home renovation gone wrong. Back in 1963, a local man took a sledgehammer to a wall in his basement. The wall crumbled and revealed a dark tunnel. He walked inside and accidentally discovered an 18-story underground doomsday bunker. It was a massive labyrinth carved out of soft rock, designed to hide 20,000 people. They even carved 1,000-pound solid stone wheels that they could roll across the hallways to seal the doors and block invaders. If you like Lord of the Rings, this has to remind you of dwarves and how they lived. One of the coolest things about modern tech is that it lets us map ancient places almost perfectly. Satellites and remote sensing tools can scan the surface of Earth and trace walls, streets, and workshops that have been buried for thousands of years. Once we have that map, we can rebuild the site digitally and even walk through it in a virtual model. It's not the same as standing on the steppe and melting bronze in open air, but it's the closest we get to stepping back in time. There are still countless vanished hubs waiting to show up on the next scan. Who knows what your neighborhood will look like in 3,600 years?
Humans invest a lot of time and money exploring the unknown. First outer space, then the ocean floor. But there's another frontier we're trying to conquer. Scientists call it the deep frontier. I'm talking about how far down to the Earth's core we've made it so far. During the 60s, humans tried digging the deepest man-made hole on Earth. This took us deep into the Arctic Circle. What later became known as the super deep borehole is also the deepest artificial point on Earth, reaching the depth of 40,230 feet. It took 20 years to drill this far into the Earth's crust, and researchers say this is only about 1/3 of the way through to the mantle. Here's a quick anatomy of our planet. If the Earth is like an onion, the crust is like the thick skin of this onion. This part is only 25 miles thick. Beyond this is the 1,800-mile deep mantle, and after that, right at the center of the Earth, is the core, which is made up of 2 layers, inner and outer. Now, can you guess where on the planet the crust is at its thinnest? On the ocean floor. When American scientists understood that, they started drilling holes on the seabed. This gave way to Project Mohole. It began in 1961, but their technology to drill deep holes on the ocean was really bad. They had to improvise. They installed a system of propellers along the sides of their drill ship to keep it steady over the hole. The main challenge was to drill as vertically as possible. Otherwise, that deep hole would look more like a deep maze. Both the Kola Super Deep Borehole project and the Project Mohole came to an official stop in the years that followed. But hey, humans have built some pretty deep stuff underground. In 1963, a Turkish man took a swing with his sledgehammer to improve his basement and discovered a tunnel. That tunnel entrance led to more openings that connected a multitude of halls and chambers. He didn't know it, but he had discovered Deringoyu. This once lost city was up to 18 stories tall and 200 feet deep. The city was large enough to host 20,000 people, and it was simply standing beneath Cappadocia in Turkey the whole time. Cappadocia hosts hundreds of subterranean dwellings. 40 of these underground cities are at least 2 stories high, but none of them are as huge as Deringoyu. There's not a lot of historical accounts of how Deringoyu was born. Some speculate that the oldest part of the complex was dug about 2000 BCE by the Hittites. The Hittites were an Indo-European civilization who formed one of the first major civilizations of the Bronze Age in West Asia. Scholars think they built this underground city to protect themselves from invasion. Others think it was actually the Christians who built the city in the 1st century CE. They speculate that it could have been constructed to protect people from the intense temperature variations, extreme heat in summer and freezing cold in winter. Geographically, the terrain under Cappadocia is great for building. The rocks are soft, which makes tunneling easier. For that same reason, opening large caves underground is fragile. That's why most chambers have pillars that support them. On the bright side, and we are, none of the floors at Deringoyu have ever collapsed. The builders of Deringoyu thought of everything. The city was shut off from the world by huge rocks that hid its entrance. It was ventilated by a total of more than 15,000 shafts, around 10 centimeters wide. This way, they guaranteed enough breathing air in the upper levels in a way that they ended up being used as the living and sleeping quarters. The lower levels of this impressive maze were mainly used for storage. But honestly, they had it all. A room for a wine press, for domestic animals, small religious buildings. They certainly didn't spare any efforts to make that underground city as complete as an above-ground one. Now, speaking of impressive underground stuff, Switzerland has the longest tunnel in the world, built here on the Swiss Alps. This absurdly huge tunnel was built over 8,000 feet below the surface. Check this out. This is what the Gotthard-based tunnel looks like. The first idea to build the tunnel was put forward as early as 1947, but construction only officially began in 1999. It took them years to approve the project and then scout for the perfect location. Even so, the 73 different rock types that compose Massif turned the construction into a real challenge. Some of the rocks were as hard as granite, and others were as soft as sandstone. This meant they needed different approaches and equipment so the whole thing wouldn't crumble down. Overall, they had to excavate about 28 million metric tons of rock to make way for the tunnel. There were many other challenges to build that far into the earth. The deeper into the mountain they got, the hotter the temperatures were. Since there's no natural ventilation, temperatures would get as high as 115 degrees Fahrenheit, making it really hard for workers to endure. The tunnel stretches for 35 miles from one end to the other. During the construction, workers had to use 4 massive tunnel boring machines, aka moles, to penetrate through the massif. Each of these moles was around 1,400 feet long. But that was one of the best things they could do, since these machines limit the disturbance to the surrounding ground and help to produce a smooth tunnel wall. You'd never guess that the world's deepest basement belongs to the Sydney Opera House in Australia. The building goes as deep underground as it grows above ground. But this basement isn't just the Opera House's foundation, it's a parking lot. This unique parking garage penetrates 120 feet underground, or 12 stories deep, while most car parks are only 4 or 5 stories deep. But that's not all that makes it unique. You see, if they decided to build a normal rectangular parking space, this would end up eliminating a bunch of possible parking spaces. And since they wanted to maximize the space they had available, they had to come up with some superb structure. First, they opened up a man-made cavern to make that dream possible. Then they had to come up with a design. That's what led to the donut-shaped cavern, or what engineers call a double helix. This design shocked the engineering community for its innovative approach. But hey, it worked. Today, there is space for over 1,000 cars down there, which seems about right for an opera house. Let's wow once again real quick. Some underground structures may take up to an hour to reach. Take this gold mine in South Africa that lies around 2.5 miles below the surface. Yeah, you may think, hey, it's just a couple of miles, why does it take an hour to get there? But the conditions are hard and it's not for the weak. But Milan Ladina, an Ecuadorian runner, even completed a half marathon there, despite temperatures reaching 104 degrees Fahrenheit, high humidity at 80%, and an atmospheric pressure of 1.4, comparable to what divers experience 5 meters under the sea. Yikes.
It's the first day of your long-awaited trip to the Amazon forest. You flew all the way to South America. More specifically, you landed in the city of Manaus. It's the heart of the Brazilian Amazon. So far, you've traveled by air, car, and now water. You are on a tiny boat, moving through the dark waters of the Amazon River. Yes, the river is also called the Amazon. And just FYI, it's the second longest river in the world. It loses only to the Nile River in Egypt. The Amazon sprawls for an impressive 2,700 square miles, beginning in Peru and ending only when it meets the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Brazil. To get a closer look at the forest, you decide to start by exploring it by boat. First up, you watch some piranha fishing. You can even try to catch one yourself if you like. As you may know, piranhas are carnivorous fish that inhabit the Amazon River, so it might not be your best option to go swimming in these waters. One of the most emblematic species of alligators present in the Amazon River basin is the broad-snouted caiman. It looks pretty much like a regular alligator, except for the fact that it has a yellow chin. Your guide leaves the boat and searches the water to show you a caiman up close. He also tells you of another legendary creature that lives in the dark waters of the river, the pink dolphin. Lucky you get to witness a family of pink dolphins showing their fins near your boat. They look magical from the place where you're sitting. You've probably never known dolphins can be pink, huh? After a few mesmerizing moments, you discover that the dolphin's pink color is nothing but an illusion. The animals are originally pinkish-gray, but due to the brown colors of the Amazon River, they look vivid pink when you stare at them from above. Your guide tells you that the pink dolphin is a central character of Brazilian folklore. Locals believe that the pink dolphins can turn into humans and wander off into towns at night. You get off your boat near one of the entrances to the forest. Now you're going to continue your trip on foot. Your guide says that you are venturing into very dangerous terrain. The Amazon is home to some of the creepiest species of wildlife on the globe, but don't worry, we'll get to see a lot of them today. You've come prepared, of course. Bug spray, a raincoat, and your sharp eyes. Inside the jungle, you need to be alert at all times. You may have heard legends of the anaconda, a snake that can swallow animals as big as a cow in one go. Sorry to break it to you, but those are not just legends. Reptiles like these do actually exist. They live deep in the jungle. It right there, moving between the trees. Is it a spider? The so-called Goliath bird-eater is a monster spider. Its legs can grow up to a foot in length, and the spider itself can weigh around 6 ounces. It's also known as the king of tarantulas. You shouldn't get too close, of course. It's not venomous to humans, but its bite can surely sting. As its name suggests, the Goliath bird-eater can even eat birds, as long as they are smaller than it is. Up next, you run into another species of spider that draws your attention. This one is so tiny that you almost don't see it. It's known by the popular name of the decoy spider. You see one of its creations, a gigantic spider built by the tiny sea-close spider in order to scare off large predators. This is as amazing as it is creepy. A spider that uses the remains of other insects and dry leaves to create the image of a large spider on its web. If it fools predators, perfect! But to us humans, this work of art looks almost endearing. Who knew there were artists in the arachnid world? Near a small lake, you witness a unique scene. A large snake is slowly slithering its way toward a lizard that is resting on a rock. The lizard seems obvious to the presence of the dangerous reptile, but right as the snake is preparing to attack, the lizard flies the scene in its iconic way. The so-called basilisk lizard is famous for its ability to walk on water, or rather run across the water. This isn't an illusion, just a matter of balancing. The small lizard moves its legs on top of the water very fast, while its long tail serves as a counterweight. I wish I could do that. If you've ever wondered what a frog looks like on the inside, you've come to the right place. Right in front of your eyes, there is a rare local species of frog. It's known as the glass frog. This species of amphibian has a type of transparent skin that is completely see-through. In other words, you can see the frog's interior with astounding clarity. It's as if you had X-ray vision. Moving on with your journey, soon you come across a pond. Floating on its water is probably the biggest water lily you've ever seen in your life. These huge plants are also known as the Victoria Amazonica. They can measure up to 8 feet across and hold the weight of a grown-up person. But I wouldn't recommend trying to climb on it if I were you. Just cause, you know, it's the Amazon forest we're talking about. The wildlife here is amazing, but the forest itself is also a sight. There are over 80,000 species of plants and trees grown in the Amazon rainforest. In fact, you can find 10% of all the world's wildlife in this jungle. An estimated 400 billion trees grow on the gigantic area the forest occupies. Of course, this place is bound to be biodiverse, right? You won't be able to witness this phenomenon during your trip, but your guide tells you about a unique species of tree that is famous for being able to walk. Yep, you've heard correctly. There are walking trees in the Amazon rainforest. They don't have legs or anything like that, but they do move around in search of better lighting conditions. The Amazon canopy is so thick that only 1% of sunlight can reach the forest floor. Because of this, some trees end up getting less sunlight than others. The so-called walking palm trees seem to be adapted to this situation. They grow new roots, which helps them move for 1 to 2 inches per day. They can walk up to 65 feet per year. Maybe that's what inspired John Ronald Reuel Tolkien to create ants, huh? Those are pretty similar tree beings that roam freely around the world. I kid you not, it's not only wildlife that inhabits the Amazon. Actually, over 30 million people live in the forest. And there are also ancient settlements that scientists believe to have been thriving there. And I'm not talking about El Dorado, that's just a myth. But in 2018, a groundbreaking study showed that up to 1 million people probably inhabited the Amazon. Between 1250 and 1500 CE. Can you imagine that? Working alongside local indigenous people, researchers from the University of Florida found several mounds in the Amazon. Besides these mounds, they also discovered interesting ditches and geoglyphs. After mapping all of these recurring mounds, scientists understood that this was a sign of an ancient settlement. They found remnants of carefully designed walls centered around plazas. This could only mean that these ancient cities were big and could host hundreds of thousands of people. These findings brought back the idea that the Amazon could have been home to thriving civilizations way before the Europeans arrived there. But rather than cities drenched in gold, they were simply well-developed agricultural societies.
The story goes that 2 Mayan twin boys loved to play ball. Sure, they were really good at it, but they also made a lot of noise when playing. The lords of the underworld soon became bothered by the sound and summoned the two boys to the underworld, a place the Mayans called Xibalba. As soon as the boys reached their gloomy destination, the lords of the underworld began putting them through a series of tests. Soon enough, the inexperienced twin boys failed the tests and lost their lives. But this was not in vain. This sad event resulted in the appearance of a beautiful fruit tree. Soon enough, a young woman saw a beautiful fruit on this tree and reached up to pick it. Legend has it that soon after that, she gave birth to another set of twin boys named Hunahpu and Xibalbaqui. Just like their ancestors, these twins were great ball players, but they were equally as loud, and the lords of the underworld became annoyed again. They decided to ask this pair of twins to come to play a game in the underworld, hoping to get rid of them too. When the twins arrived, the lord sent them through a number of frightening places. The first one was the House of Gloom, which was very dark. They then passed through the House of Knives, where they had to avoid getting injured. The twins then built a fire in the House of Cold, so that they didn't freeze, and ran through the House of Jaguars, where they tricked the animals into not eating them. Finally, they entered the House of Bats, where they seemed to have lost their luck. One of the bats managed to run off with Hunahpu's head. The lords then challenged the twins to play ball with them, but the boys were clearly at a disadvantage. Xibalbaqui placed a turtle on Hunahpu's shoulders to make up for his lost head, and they began playing. As the lords became distracted by an animal near the court, Xibalbaqui stole his brother's head and placed it back in its place. Much to the annoyance of the lords, the twins were now able to tie the game. Hunahpu and Xibalbaqui continued to perform a series of tricks for the lords of the underworld. One of them involved Xibalbaqui injuring Hunahpu and then bringing him back to life. The lords were so impressed by the twins' performance that they asked them to do the same trick on them. Of course, the twins agreed, but after performing their trick on some of the lords, they refused to revive them. Seeing what had happened, the lords of the underworld admitted defeat and begged for their lives, promising not to intervene in the lives of people ever again. Hunahpu and Xibalbaqui were happy to have avenged their ancestors and gained the respect of the lords. Legend has it that the lords of heaven were so impressed by the twins that they took them to live in the sky by turning them into the moon and the sun. The Maya civilization was one of the most dominant indigenous societies in history, and their folklore and traditions are still discovered and studied today. They used to live in a territory called Mesoamerica. It was made up of modern-day Mexico and parts of Central America like Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, Yucatan Peninsula, and El Salvador. They lived from 1800 to 900 BCE and up to 900 to 1500 CE. Apart from their impressive legends, the Maya were very skilled inventors. They're known for their calendars, writing systems, farming methods, and sports. Their writing, for example, was found preserved on buildings and stone monuments, as well as in rare books and pottery. It's a system made out of more than 800 hieroglyphics in various combinations. Each of those signs was said to represent a syllable. Their writing system was deciphered by accident by Tatiana Proskorakov, an American woman who initially studied to be an architect. Since she didn't find a job in her field, she eventually became a Mayanist in her own right, despite not being academically trained. She was the first to notice that the Mayan upended frog glyph meant birth, and that their toothache glyph meant the date when the king ascended to the throne. It made it easier for scientists to pinpoint birthdays, as well as the names of the rulers of a specific Mayan dynasty. They also invented the concept of zero, which is seen as one of the greatest innovations in mathematics, physics, and human history altogether. Sure, even back then, people understood the idea of having nothing, but the concept of zero as a number is a relatively new invention. A fun fact about Mayans is that they really liked hats. The bigger your hat was, the more important you looked. Not only was it a sort of fashion statement, but it also made them look taller, which was a big deal for their aesthetic. The Mayans also came up with one of the most intricate and complex calendars in human history. It was the first to use 0 as a placeholder. Their calendar ended on December 21st, 2012, which led some people to believe that it translated to the end of the world. Obviously, that was not the case. It just so happened that the date coincided with the end of a Mayan cycle of years. But you know, as advanced in science and astronomy as they were, they did make some mistakes. One of them was their belief that the world was flat. Their theory was that the 4 corners of the world were watched by the Brother Lords, who kept the sky from falling over their lands. Hats off for their menus, though, as they were well-known chocolate eaters. They turned eating chocolate into a form of art. The drink they made wasn't really like the hot chocolate we enjoy today, though. The recipe included mixing cacao with water, honey, chili pepper, cornmeal, and other ingredients to make a foamy, spicy drink. The ritual of drinking cacao was a crucial part of their celebrations. We're not done discovering all the amazing parts of their architecture and civilization. It was only a few years ago that a Maya pyramid was found at Tonina, in the Mexican state of Chiapas. It was estimated to be more than 1,000 years old. The reason why it escaped archaeologists for so long was that it lay hidden under what was believed to be a natural hill. The ruins of 2 Mayan cities have been recently discovered in the Mexican state of Campeche. Why didn't we find them until now? Well, they were concealed by really thick vegetation, which made it difficult for archaeologists to reach them. The Mayans didn't just disappear. Their descendants are still around today, many of them choosing to live in their ancestral homelands. You can find them in Guatemala, for example, where the Maya people make up the majority of the population. Overall, the Maya ethnic group contains people that speak different Mayan languages, such as Yucatec, Quiche, Quechua, or Mopan. They had no idea what a spa day was, but the Mayans really enjoyed a nice sweat once in a while. Sweat lodges were discovered around ancient Mayan sites. They were built out of stone or adobe. These rooms were an essential part of their cleansing and healthcare rituals. One of the earliest sweat lodges was found in Quello in northern Belize and appeared to date back 3,000 years. One of the most important parts of the Mayan culture was a ball game which they named Pix. It had both political and spiritual significance. We can see ball courts at important parts of Mayan archaeological sites. The main goal of the game was to pass a rubber ball through a very high stone hoop without using your hands. Basically, it was a combination of soccer and basketball. However, it could have serious consequences. The loser could, at times, even lose his own life. Ooh, high stakes indeed. Because of this game and the need for bouncy balls, the Mayan people were some of the first cultures to use rubber. They made it using natural latex. There were different kinds of rubber depending on what natural substances the latex was mixed with. And that, my friend, is the way the ball bounces. Sorry, but you know me, I just couldn't resist. See this place on the map? Yeah, right there. It's estimated that around 100 people have vanished or lost their lives here. Why, you ask? Well, it seems they were all looking for this guy, Percy Fawcett. He was a British colonel, famous for his sharp blue eyes, perfectly groomed beard, and signature hat. He looked like a character from Pride and Prejudice, but lived more like Indiana Jones. In fact, this character was inspired by Fawcett's story. But his disappearance in 1925 was more macabre than any movie plot. Colonel Fawcett was bold. Not the ask-your-neighbor's Wi-Fi password kind of bold. I'm talking full-on, I don't care that much about my life bold. He used to be a soldier in Sri Lanka and even did a secret spy gig in Morocco, but he needed more. So in 1906, Fawcett started exploring parts of Brazil and Bolivia where no one had dared to go before. His mission was to create secret, mind-blowing maps. Okay, that doesn't sound too risky, but trust me, it was. If you want to explore the world nowadays, you just open Google Earth and, well, that's it. No danger, no adrenaline, just maybe one or two creepy street view photos. Ew. But we're talking about the beginning of the 20th century, when satellites and this weird Google car didn't exist. Back then, if you wanted to fill in the world map, you actually had to explore the land on foot. So that's how Colonel Fawcett ended up in South America. And he became famous for his expeditions to map out the wild Amazon. He was the first guy to record the locations of waterfalls in that region, for example. But then he got obsessed. Blame it on lack of sleep or whatever sketchy Amazon jungle juice he was sipping, but suddenly he was like, I'll bet there's an ancient advanced city hidden somewhere around here. Spoiler alert, there wasn't. But he was hooked on that idea. Hanging out with native Indians for so long convinced him that large groups could totally thrive in the middle of a massive rainforest. And of course, Fawcett loved a good old adventure story, especially the ones from the 16th and 17th centuries, written by European explorers. In those stories, adventurers claimed they had found huge settlements and fine roadways deep in the heart of Latin America. But Fawcett's all-time favorite story came from a manuscript written in 1753. Back then, adventurers were hunting for precious metals in Brazil when they stumbled upon a ruined city with monumental buildings, roads, and plazas. Oh, and every corner had a Roman-style spire. Naturally, the colonel was all in to find it. Too bad no one told him this manuscript is mostly considered a forgery. Yep, this story is as real as Snow White's. But then, things got weird. The settlement described in that manuscript was supposedly located in the northeast side of Brazil. But now, he's saying there's an advanced civilization in Mato Grosso, which is in a different part of the country. So he decided to name this new place the City of Z. Back in the 1920s, the colonel launched 2 separate expeditions to find it, but both trips failed, as he faced terrible weather, fever, and of course, exhaustion. Now, tell me in the comments, what do you think Fawcett did after 2 failed expeditions? Option A, he quit. Option B, he called his mom. Option C, he tried again because he didn't get the memo that the universe is clearly saying stop. Well, of course, option C is the right answer. This is relentless Fawcett we're talking about. So, 3 years later, the colonel finally gathered enough cash to launch yet another expedition in search of the City of Z. All he needed was a crew of people crazy enough to join him. Famous and experienced explorers were begging to come along. But nope, Fawcett decided to take his son and his best buddy instead. In January 1925, this brave trio set off on their journey. They packed mosquito nets, canned food, and made a promise, we shall return. Another spoiler alert, they didn't. Uh-oh. The journey kicked off in New Jersey, and then they sailed all the way to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. There, they stopped to grab some pack animals, like horses, and hired a couple of local guides. Now they were ready to head to the city of Cuiabá. Now keep in mind the distances in Brazil are crazy huge. So this little journey was like traveling from Miami to Chicago on foot. 3 months later, they finally ventured into the jungle for the first time. And that's when the fun really began. The crew faced piranha-infested rivers, an endless maze of thick trees, and the worst part, bugs. The constant annoying zzz of a gazillion mosquitoes wouldn't let them sleep, and Fawcett's best friend's foot got huge from tick bites. But the colonel didn't have time to babysit his friend's princess foot. Oh no, he was too obsessed to take a break. In fact, at some point, he was so far ahead of his companions that he had to camp alone for a night. On May 29th, Fawcett finally came to his senses. There was no City of Z. But did he let that stop him? Not really. He unpacked their gear and sent the local guides back to Cuiabá. But before saying a final goodbye, he asked them to deliver a letter to his wife, saying something like, "Don't worry, hon, our son is well and getting stronger every day." Sure he was. Anyway, after this dramatic farewell, the trio set off into the bush alone. The darkness swallowed the thick forest, and then they were never seen again. Okay, that was intense, so let's fast forward. 2 years later, the newspapers were still speculating whether the trio could still be alive, and Fawcett became a legend, like Bigfoot, but less hairy. One guy said that the colonel had become one of the locals and was living his happily ever after in the jungle. Another guy said he was held prisoner by the Indians, but no one could confirm any of these sightings. It wasn't until 1928 that the British authorities finally thought better late than never and decided to look for Fawcett and his crew. By that time, they were sure their expedition had perished, but they still needed proof. And after days and days of surviving the jungle's worst nightmares, they found, well, nothing. But in a weird way, this mystery inspired more explorers to look for them. It's estimated that about 100 people have passed away in this process, and a few have followed in the explorers' footsteps by disappearing without a trace. So, what really happened to the expedition? Researchers have pointed their fingers at everything under the sun: parasitic infections, starvation, drowning, jaguar attacks, you name it. Some even say Fawcett dove headfirst into mysticism and started an occult community in the jungle. The Brazilian anthropologist Orlando Vilas-Boas was probably the one who got the closest to solving this case. Back in the 1950s, he was working with the Kalapalo Indians when they suddenly admitted to, getting rid of Fawcett. They even had bones to prove it. But it turns out a forensic analysis showed that the remains didn't belong to the colonel. So we're back to square one, and nobody knows, to this day, whatever the heck happened to them. Fawcett's quest, as we know it today, is based on some pretty questionable sources. But there is a possibility that he wasn't living in Delulu land after all. Recent discoveries suggest that his idea of a sophisticated jungle city wasn't just pure fantasy. In 2024, a massive ancient city was found in the Amazon, hidden beneath dense vegetation. Evidence suggests it was built around 2,500 years ago, and it was surprisingly advanced, featuring houses and plazas, all connected by an incredible network of roads and canals. But this city was in a forest in Ecuador, not Brazil. So who knows? Maybe the legendary city of Z is still out there. Ooh.
You've probably heard about the mysterious sea state of Atlantis. It was a high-tech utopia where people lived happily, but then something happened, and Atlantis disappeared from the face of the earth. Many people believe that this city lies at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. But what if we've been looking in the wrong place all this time? What if it's somewhere different from where they're trying to find it? What if all this time Atlantis was in the middle of the Sahara Desert? Well, this unexpected theory has some evidence, but to study this version, you first need to understand what Atlantis was and how we got to know about it. The very first mention of the mysterious city was in 360 BCE. Ancient philosopher Plato wrote about Atlantis. His work, Dialogues, described Atlantis as a rich land with advanced technologies. Its inhabitants were powerful, intelligent, and beautiful, like superhumans. He described in detail the structure of the city, and this was the main reason why many people believed in the existence of Atlantis. According to his records, the Atlanteans built this place in several concentric circles of black and red stone. Then they covered these circles with brass, tin, and precious metals. In the city, there were water channels on which ships sailed. The Atlanteans were sailors, so they built a passage from their city to the open sea. On the internet, you can find many drawings of Atlantis, created based on Plato's descriptions. Take a look at these drawings and an actual photo of the Eye of the Sahara. This place in the Sahara has a shape of several concentric circles. It looks as if a destroyed city left a trace on the sand. Many people have written online that the lost city was located there, but no one could prove it. Once upon a time, the Sahara was filled with rivers and lakes. In prehistoric times, there was only water there. So far, everything matches. The Eye of the Sahara was first discovered in the 1930s. This place was considered a crater from a fallen meteorite. But in the middle of the 20th century, scientists conducted a soil analysis and refuted the version with a fallen space rock. In the end, everyone agreed that this was a dome of molten rocks under which magma was raging. For millions of years, wind and water had been destroying the formed landscape and eventually made it look like perfect circles. But what if the Atlanteans once came to this place and used natural circles to build a city? In this case, we would have many traces and artifacts from this developed civilization. And yes, archaeologists did find some arrowheads, spears, oars, and other things there. But this has nothing to do with Atlantis. In the eye of the Sahara, a multitude of Acheulean artifacts lies. It was an ancient tribe that frequented this place. For the first time, Acheulean tools appeared more than 1.5 million years ago. Some of the items found there may be 130,000 years old, and according to the records, Atlantis existed about 12,000 years ago. Archaeologists found no artificial structures in this place. There was also no debris or traces of a large city. People would have found some stuff if a big city with advanced technologies had existed here. The main supporter of this idea was one YouTube channel. It collected 1 million views and attracted the attention of many historians and anthropologists. The theory that the Eye of the Sahara is Atlantis was quickly refuted. People found too many discrepancies between this place and the description of Atlantis. The author tried to catch the viewer's attention by presenting external similarities between the natural landscape and the fictional ancient city. Another popular theory claims that Atlantis was a real continent located off the Bahamas, but then this city was swallowed up by the Bermuda Triangle. According to this legend, the city ruins still lie at the bottom of the triangle, but there's no confirmation of this theory either. Writer Charles Berlitz invented it. Adherents of this theory claim that the walls and streets in the western part of the Bahamas might be the ruins of Atlantis. But scientists disagree. They have proven that these walls are natural formations of coastal rocks. There are also rumors that the story of Atlantis was inspired by an actual historical catastrophe, the Black Sea Flood. This is the Bosporus, a strait in Turkey connecting the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara. Around 5600 BCE, the Black Sea was twice as small as it is now and had many cities on its shores. Unfortunately, a huge flood destroyed this flourishing civilization. Within a year, cities descended underwater, and surviving inhabitants moved to foreign lands and spread stories about the flood. Maybe these stories inspired Plato to come up with Atlantis. In the 1950s, people came up with another version. Atlantis was the continent that is now Antarctica. Tens of thousands of years ago, a warm continent with a developed city shifted to the northern part of our planet because of the movement of Earth's crust. The Atlanteans couldn't adapt to the cold conditions, and Atlantis was covered with a thick layer of ice. This theory was refuted when scientists began studying the tectonic plates' nature. It turned out that Earth's crust couldn't have moved such a huge continent as Antarctica. The tectonic plates don't behave this way at all. But the main question is, was Atlantis real? No one had described it before Plato. Perhaps the philosopher came up with it. Maybe he did this to emphasize the correctness of his views on life and to identify his philosophical theories. In his works, he wrote a lot about divine and human nature and how people can destroy this nature. He spoke of decaying ideal societies because of immoral behavior and vices. The Atlanteans were once moral, spiritual people who created a utopia, but then they became greedy and mean. They destroyed their inner nature, and for this, they had to witness the destruction of their city. One night, fires and earthquakes hit Atlantis and plunged the city into the sea. The higher powers punished people for their immoral behavior, and Plato also wanted everyone to be afraid of moral decay. But judging by the descriptions of the earthquakes and fire, it may seem that Atlantis was destroyed by a volcanic eruption, as it was with the ancient Roman city of Pompeii. And such destructions have happened pretty often throughout history. Natural disasters ruined many developed cities. One of the most famous cases occurred in 1100 BCE in the Mediterranean Sea, when a volcanic eruption destroyed the highly developed Minoan society. The Minoan society existed for about 2,000 years. These people mostly lived on the islands of Crete and Santorini, located north of Crete. The Minoans had beautiful houses, a sewage system, and a developed economy. They were engaged in agriculture, grew fruits and vegetables, painted frescoes, and made jewelry. They were the first people to found the Thalassocracy, an empire based on the sea. They lived off of fishing, piracy, and maritime trade. At the time, they performed cruel rituals, and their way of life was far from moral. They were used to earthquakes on the island of Santorini, so they reinforced the walls of the city with wooden beams, but they didn't know what a volcanic eruption was. And when the sulfur smell appeared in the air, they didn't suspect the impending catastrophe. When the volcano spilled out tons of lava and ash, all the residents of Santorini abandoned their homes and tried to escape, but they couldn't. The eruption and earthquake triggered a tsunami. A large wave flooded the coastal part of the island of Crete. This hit the economy of the Minoans hard and destroyed their port harbor. Then, foreigners attacked Crete and finally destroyed the developed civilization. Some historians think that Plato could have referred to the Minoan Empire when describing Atlantis.